Okay, I'm going to ask Don Blake, a truly great American, who's a veteran, to please stand up and lead us in the flag salute. Thank you. Okay, folks, I think we have almost a full house. I don't know if we have any people in the overflow room. Someone can let us know. When I walked by, I didn't see that many, if any. We're going tonight to take any speaker cards of people who came here to speak on another subject. There are other subjects, we hope. And again, as per Mr. Spitz's excellent rule, we'll take speaker cards at 7 p.m. as well. Okay? Additionally, we're going to let Dr. Breggy present. He's worked very hard with his team for days, and the board saw it last night. We got to review it a little bit, but we want everyone else to see it. Then the board is going to have a discussion, and then we're going to take your comments, because I'm sure, based on what you hear or see, you may adjust your public comments to address what you hear or see. So I think that's probably a much more organized fashion. It worked last time, I think, better than in previous times. So Dr. Breggy, I'm just going to open up the agenda, make sure I'm at the right place. Report of closed session action.
There was no action taken in closed session.
Okay. So we're at 6, professional and official business. Is anyone, it's for discussion and approval of reconfiguration plan.
We'll have the presentation.
Right, so we'll have, do you
Great.
want to have the presentation? We don't
Yes.
just, okay, we'll have the presentation first. Thank you.
Great.
Also, folks, board members, when Dr. Breggy's done, you can ask questions, but let him try to get through it, because we interrupt and we all lose our train of thought, and it interrupts it for the public.
There
Thank
go the
you.
notepads.
Exactly. Thank you. Dr. Breggy, you have the floor.
Thank you for this opportunity to come back to the Board of Education and provide you with some information that was asked of us at the last meeting. Mr. Seaman and I will be providing this information to you. Just as a recap, we were asked to provide some information about what does a 3 TK8 school building setup look like, along with 1 TK through 5. What does that model look like as a school district? And also, what are the programmatic benefits as a result of the change, specifically at the middle school levels? And just logistically, can this happen? What does it look like? So we did take some steps to answer the questions that were asked of us. We did another full enrollment analysis of all of our sites. Our cabinet actually went out and visited each of the 4 K-8 schools so that we could walk in and out of classrooms to get a look and feel for what was happening at the middle school level. We collaborated with Mr. Blake and also with Mr. Palman, and they were very helpful to us during our discussions and also our investigation. And then also, we're going to just give you a brief overview of some of the scheduling and some of the financial implications of this particular model. So what we did with the enrollment is, and this is a little bit different than what we've done in the past, is we actually rolled up the enrollment. So the 6th graders are our current 5th graders. And so that may look a little off to you if you're a staff member and you're wondering where those kids are, but we rolled up the 5th graders for next year to 6th, 7th, and 8th, and that gives you an indication of the number of students at each school building at the middle school level. Just a typical schedule for a middle school student in our district, which is our core classes along with a couple of electives. We didn't put the homeroom period on there. And then the middle school master schedule, I'm not sure if we can click on that or not. We're going to give that a shot. We want you to see, there was a discussion last week where we were having some questions from the board about whether, could we fit, how would that look? And so This is just an example of a schedule at Horace Mann. This is for this year at the middle school level. And as you can see, those gray boxes are actually times when classrooms are empty. And what happens in our schools, which is pretty natural, and I certainly did this when I was a teacher as well, that when there's open space, you begin to take it, and you encroach on getting some extra space. And so when we started to have the discussion about will it fit, can we put people in classrooms, we made sure that we would back and we looked at the master schedule and what is the utilization of each classroom each period. These couple slides that I just want to show you, there was a lot of questions about the honors enrollment, and Mr. Allen did a great job at our forum talking about how difficult it is when you're putting together a master schedule and you're actually trying to put people into classes when you don't have that many sections of classes. And so this is a slide for English honors at each school at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And so what's interesting about this particular slide is no matter what combination you're looking at as far as consolidation, if you're moving from 4 middle schools to 3 middle schools, oftentimes, even at this particular scenario, and if you look at the Hawthorne Horace Mann example for 6th grade honors English, that doesn't consolidate to one section. That you're still going to have 2 sections because the class size maximum is 29. So when you're going from 4 middle schools to 3 middle schools, you just don't achieve that maximum savings or efficiency in our classrooms. And you could tell by really any of these slides that each one is its own section. And if they were to be combined, you would have 2 sections. So there really wouldn't be a savings there. Similar to math as well. Same type of situation. If you were to start combining students, where you get your most savings again is the consolidation to 1. When we went out to our K-8 sites, we did look at the middle school classrooms, and it's, again, nothing seems to be a black and white. We do a great job of utilizing our classrooms. Many times our teachers are using, it's not just grade level specific, because so many of our teachers are working in more than one grade level. But we did feel confident about the number of classrooms per school for middle school instructional spaces. And there could be a little more, could be a little less, depending on how they're being currently utilized. And that example is sometimes we'd walk into a classroom. I certainly did at BV and saw that it was also a 5th grade classroom, as well as a 6th grade classroom. So we did the best we could to see if there was open space for the type of consolidation that we were asked to look at, and there certainly was.
Thank you. So to answer the question, we actually did a little extra work because we wanted to answer this from 3 different approaches. And so listed here, we have 3 different approaches. And by no priority or hierarchy, we have approach 1, which we basically took Hawthorne middle schools and divided them into 1/3 and equally distributed them across Beverly Vista, Horace Mann, and El Rodeo. Basically, this would help us with the school choice. If a parent were to request a certain location, we could hold up to possibly 1/3 of that population and try to redistribute equally. Approach 2 was we took Hawthorne middle school students and transitioned them into Horace Mann. And then approach 3, we took Horace Mann middle school students and transitioned them into Hawthorne. So in approach 1, you'll notice here that we were able to divide the Hawthorne middle school students equally. You'll see in 6th grade, the blue numbers indicate that 25 students were equally distributed across 6th grade at Horace Mann, Beverly Vista, and El Rodeo. 25 students in 7th grade and 27 students in 8th grade. What is important to look at this slide, and the reason we broke it down specifically, is you'll also notice that we've talked anywhere between about 150 students for the middle school philosophy to have the teaming where we have an individual grade level math teacher that only teaches 8th grade and isn't split between multiple grade levels. You'll see that we do not, even with rolling 1/3 to each of the other 3 middle schools, we do not reach which we've coined already, that critical mass that is needed for us to be able to implement an effective middle school philosophy. So if you look in approach 1 as well, that would leave then Hawthorne as a TK5 school, and you will see these are projected enrollments, which we rolled then kindergarten into first grade, first into second, and that would leave us with 311 students at Hawthorne. So with approach 1, things that we would like to highlight in this process is there was 226 students from Hawthorne that would be equally redistributed amongst the 3 buildings, El Rodeo, Beverly Vista, and Horace Mann. The cost savings from this model, compared to what we currently function under, would only be $63,856. The facilities can accommodate us dividing the Hawthorne Middle School into the 3 other schools. You'll see Beverly Vista would need a minimum of 12 total spaces, which there's 19 available to be able to accommodate the additional students from Hawthorne. Horace Mann would need 10, and then El Rodeo would need 12. The programmatic implications, my apologies, is the one thing that I did you'll notice the 63,856 was I ensured equity across all 3 middle schools. So if there was a program currently run at one of our middle schools, I ensured that I staffed for that program at all the other 2 locations. So the curriculum is equalized or equitable across all 3 middle schools. However, that does not assist with the inflexibility of master scheduling. We are still up against if a student is an honor student in 8th grade algebra and happens to want to be an art student, if the master schedule aligns, that student might have to make a choice still. It does not allow for flexibility because we are not at that critical mass stage. So when I talked about the equitable courses that I said that we staffed in this approach across all 3 middle schools, this was the list. This is also consistent with the Future Focus Schools list, where when they did their presentation to the community forum, there were some areas where there were some missing opportunities for students at certain middle schools. This list I staffed in this approach where all of these classes would be offered with a staff member, at least a minimum of 1 section per middle school. So in approach 2, Hawthorne students would transition into Horace Mann Middle School. So once again, I wanted to go ahead and show that math. So you'll see in 7th grade now, we have 73 students from Hawthorne transitioning over to Horace Mann, which would put us close to that critical mass. That's what we were talking about. By combining 2 of the middle schools, we would be close to that 148, 138, 136, which would leave us with 422 students at Horace Mann in the middle school. The implications of this, like we stated, we'd be reallocating 226 kids. The cost savings is still the exact same. The staffing is still the exact same. Outside of, you notice we would need now 15 spaces at Horace Mann versus the previous 10, but we can house those students at Horace Mann. The implications for program implementation, like I stated earlier, in this approach, we did ensure that there was equitable course offerings across all 3 middle schools still. It does increase Horace Mann's master scheduling flexibility because we have those additional students now to be able to create additional sections and teachers. However, it does not help Beverly Vista and or El Rodeo with their master scheduling. They would still be up against what we're currently facing today. So in approach 3, we just wanted to look at what if we were to take the Horace Mann students and transition them to Hawthorne. So once again, you'll see the data and the numbers obviously do not change. We are closer to that critical mass in which we've coined and talked about of getting closer to 150 for the middle school philosophy for grade level specialists. The implications of this plan, though, is we are now taking 196 students from Horace Mann, transferring over to Hawthorne. Same cost savings of the $63,856. We would need 15 minimum total spaces. with only 16 available at Hawthorne. So that would be a very extreme tight fit of taking our Horace Mann students and bringing them over. But we would increase flexibility for Horace Mann's master schedule. We would be decreasing still, the El Rodeo and Beverly Vista would still have a tight master schedule. So one of the things that I did want to address that I haven't had an opportunity to talk in any of these forums yet is a lot of people are asking about what is the juice behind, or what are some of the things that we might be missing out as a community. And one of the things that I definitely would like to address are these are only some of the samplings of what is happening around us, what is happening in my previous life, what is not happening here. An example, we have talked both parent feedback, student feedback, community members one-on-one, world language program. We used to have a world language program here many years ago. We do not currently have a foreign language program. Offering a world language program grades 1st through 5th grade would need 4 staff members with this current approach, right? We would still be running 4 TK5. If you look in the top green under the assumptions, anything's presented from the FFST or from us currently, the assumption is that teacher salary and benefits on average in our district is $118,436. The average cost, I went back and looked at the last 2 years of what it cost us to implement a new program into the classroom, from purchasing materials to rearranging furniture, and the average cost was $8,150. So that is where these numbers come from in this chart for operating 3 middle schools. To have the world language at 4 locations, it would cost me $473,744 to create the program, and that's just the staff member. To create the program, $32,600, which would total $506. When we first did our presentation, that was one of the things that we hoped to address, was with any of the previous whether it was a consolidated middle school or consolidating to 3 TK8s. Where am I going? Sorry, this is where the $4 million is where I would like to reallocate. That is the cost savings. Taking that $4 million and reallocating some of those funds would be able to purchase me these programs and be able to get them up and running. That's the important piece to think about when we're talking about the $4 million in cost savings. Where can we re-inject some of that dollars to be able to offer additional opportunities for our students? In addition, I have coding up there. I have Project Lead the Way at the high school. You notice that I'm not just speaking about the middle school, that we're speaking about TK through 12th grade. Why Project Lead the Way? An example is the A through G curriculum, or the University of California just awarded Project Lead the Way honors credit. We do not offer any engineering courses at that 9th through 12th grade level. But we do offer STEM from TK to 8th. So why don't we have that natural progression for students to take engineering courses 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade? And we know that they would receive honors credit by taking those courses. To do so, I would need at least a 0.4 staff member, or 2/5, to be able to just kick that off. I'd have to run an intro class. And so that's some of the proposed new course offerings that I would hope through this process we would be able to utilize some of the reallocated money to fund. In addition, here are some of the other things that I think a lot of us have concerns, or a lot of us have been addressing. And I just wanted to be able to throw them up. Is one of the things that Mr. Spitz had even spoken about last week is the focus on the math curriculum and being able to divide our math curriculum into additional layers. Bringing in some of our high school curriculum down into the TK8s, offering maybe a geometry course to our 8th grade, moving algebra down to 7th grade, okay? Adding honors programs to our middle school science curriculum. We currently don't offer honors in our current middle school science program. Increase the accessibility to our world language. Having our teachers travel less, which would give our students additional accessibility to those staff members, so they could run things like extracurricular programs around French or Spanish. Right now, our teacher teaches and then leaves. Bringing career-related pathways into the middle school. Right now, we are working with Cindy Dubin and a lot of our high school staff to offer after-school GATE programs around robotics journalism, video production, culinary arts, and they're highly successful. They just competed last weekend at the Skills USA and did really well. We had 3 of our middle school programs that participated in the GATE program participate, but we could offer that into an elective course in the middle school. Create teaming opportunities for our middle school teachers to be able to collaborate and address some of the social emotional well-being through a school-wide positive behavior support or a multi-tiered system of support. Having a full-time school counselor would be a great addition to that bullet point. And those are just some of the things that we currently need to and are working on trying to enhance to ensure that we have that robust middle school experience for our students.
So just as a background slide, this started for me about a year ago when I came into the district, and within just a few weeks was told to look at a board-directed plan to cut $5 million from our budget, and we tried really, really hard to do that. And this slide is purposeful because this seems to be the cycle of what's occurred in our school district for the last decade, is looking to cut, making presentations, and then doing top-down type decisions when it comes to making cuts. And so we made presentations in February on the 9th and the 16th. And then on the 28th, through a lot of very difficult conversations, we did actually make a cut, and that was very far short of the $5 million at $1.7 million. Some of the recommendations that we made a year ago were to work with the JPA, the City of Beverly Hills, to do a cost analysis to see if we were getting what we should out of the JPA. And we did that this year. And I'm very pleased that we worked very hard to get some additional funding for our JPA. So those are some things that we did for our revenue. Special education, a dedicated person, somebody that was on staff and not contracted out to help us look at an analysis of where we are spending our money and where we could make some savings. We've done that. We'd also like to begin to looking at some of our athletic programs and looking at the cost of those programs, the cost of transportation, the number of students involved, and that's something we'd like to do in the near future. So we all had a responsibility a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and that is to continuously engage the public and educate the public about school finance, how we run our schools. We are a very, very complex organization. And at the end of the day, with all of that information, is execute and make a decision. So last February, and then going into the end of last year and into the beginning of this year, we started to involve the community in our Future Focused Schools group. And so I'm going to go through these slides very quickly, but it's just a reminder that we've spent a lot of time looking at a number of options and included the community as well. We had our initial charge to come up with viable options. We assembled a team, and the cabinet provided support. Before the work even began, we started to do we had a proposal for the board. We framed what the scope of work would be for the team. We looked at important historical information, and we answered questions that were deep in the community and really important information for us to know before we started our work. The development piece was that we committed to the vision and the mission of the school district, and we began to look at an overview of each department, finances, facilities, educational programming, and we included that information when we met with our team. The work was long, it was hard, we had difficult conversations, as you heard before, and we gave updates to the Board of Education and public during the course of our meetings. We had checks and balances also with the Board of Education. And we stuck pretty close to our timeline that we presented at the beginning of the school year, going a little bit past, because of the holidays, to a January 23rd end, and then a recommendation from our team. So just as a reminder, the superintendent's cabinet, so my team, we looked at a recommendation for immediate transition to 3 TK8 buildings for next year, and then the following year, we'd like to move quickly to to 1 middle school. The Future Focus Schools team had a recommendation of no change for the next school year, but then an immediate transition to 3 TK8 buildings, and then in the future, moving to 1 dedicated middle school. The Board of Education tonight, and will continue the conversation that they're having, and it's a difficult one. We all look at it from different perspective, and decisions and direction, it's tough. There was talk about no change. There was talk about establishing a lighthouse committee. And then there was also some talk about some of the work that was done by the cabinet and also the Future Focus Schools team. So that is the information that we were asked to provide for our Board of Education and then some, and we'd be happy to open that up to the board for any questions.
Yeah, actually don't have any questions. I thought the presentation was very clear. I appreciated the extent of research that went into it. And there were a few things in particular that I thought were notable. First were the cost savings from shifting to just 3 K8s and K5. You know, as you guys mentioned, it's only $63,000, which to me is not a substantial saving. In addition to that, I think that most of that presentation pointed to something that to me seems pretty clear, which is that closing 1 middle school and having 3 K8s and a K5 isn't a viable option. And there are a few reasons that I'd like to outline for this. First of all is the cost savings, of course, only $63,000. And you also have the enormous transition. You're adding about 25 extra kids per grade, and in the process of doing so, you're shifting 200 kids. You aren't going to offer the incredible extra opportunities that Mr. Seaman outlined if you only have an extra 25 kids per grade. And there were a few approaches that the presentation outlined if we did want to go down this route, how we could implement it. Of course, equitably distributing the students or moving them all to 1 school site. I would say that if we were to shift them all to 1 school site, you know, moving all of Hawthorne to Horace Mann or vice versa, that's not something that promotes equity. Because what it would do is it would get us to critical mass at 1 school site, and then at the other 2, you're still preserving those same problems. You still have kids who aren't able to take the classes and electives they want to take, and students who are being transplanted, you know, and are potentially going to struggle, all for the sake of having an additional 20 kids per grade or just adding benefits to 1 particular middle school. I think that the true benefits of some type of consolidation arise when you significantly increase the concentration of your middle school students. And that goes beyond just a marginal increase of 20 or 30 kids per grade. You talk about benefits like flexible scheduling and diverse programming. Those are opportunities we want to offer to every single kid in the district. We want to meet the needs of the entire spectrum. If somebody wants to take an honors class, we should not be keeping a system that limits them from doing so. If somebody wants to take you know, an elective, we don't want to keep them in a system where, number 1, there aren't many electives offered, and number 2, even if there is an elective they want to take, the schedule isn't flexible enough for them to actually be able to get into that class. And so, and I think the biggest thing of all is high school readiness. Today, our middle schoolers do not have robust academic programs, and there aren't dynamic pathways from the middle school to the high school. Students aren't prepared, and I feel that as the district staff outlined, that attributes of this plan in terms of the minimal change in enrollment, the minimal cost savings that would go towards additional programming in other areas, and of course the enormous transition for hundreds of students don't bring us to where we want to be as a district. I would say that shifting to 3 middle schools in either the short or long term doesn't do any of these enormous advantages. And you know, what it certainly does, when looking forward, I think the only viable configurations that meet the diverse needs of our students are those with maximum consolidation, those that offer critical mass for every single kid in the district, namely either a dedicated middle school or a 7 to 12 model at the high school. You know, for the past few months, administrators, teachers, parents, students, and the Future Focus Schools team have all analyzed in depth which configurations they thought were best. I think our community and board would be well served to uphold their consensus that this type of consolidation is necessary. I do believe that we've examined sufficient evidence to make some conclusions regarding reconfiguration. Personally, if the board were to vote tonight, I'd be comfortable voting for an eventual dedicated middle school to open a couple years down the line, but there is so much time for further study. Before accepting any new model, let's put together a precise implementation plan to make sure we do this right and come to the correct conclusion. And let's certainly not settle for some new iteration of the K-8 model that might involve closures and displacement and that we know will not meet our students' needs. Let's form committees to look in depth at the dedicated middle school and 7 to 12 models and explore class by class, dollar by dollar, student by student, how these models will impact our community's future. I think the most important thing here is let's not push an arbitrary change just for the sake of claiming decisive action. Let's make a change because we're sure it offers the best future for our students.
Mr. Spitz?
Thank you, Mrs. Korbatov. I've tried to focus this statement to the discussion that we had last week and to hopefully move forward from there. We're faced with two urgent and transformational issues. One is educational and the other is financial. Both issues are going to have to be addressed with a single decision because they're interconnected. The educational issue, as we have discussed, is the lack of a critical mass of students in our middle schools, resulting in substandard learning opportunities. The K-8 model may be the gold standard elsewhere or everywhere else, as Mrs. Korbatov claimed, but it definitely is not the gold standard in our district because our middle school students are deprived of a quality education under that model. Sending our 12 and 13-year-old students to the high school, as advocated last week by Councilmember Mirisch and Jonathan Prince, is not an alternative because Beverly High can't be rebuilt to accommodate them sooner than 5 or 6 years from now, if it will be possible. Reconfiguration to 3 middle schools would relocate 20 or 25 students at each grade level to each of the other schools, and that would not resolve the critical mass issue, as Mr. Artell pointed out. The Future Focus Study Team and our superintendent and 80% of our high school students and several master teachers all have recommended reconfiguration to 1 middle school. Ultimately, 2 questions we should ask ourselves as school board members are: first, should we not follow the unanimous recommendation of all those preeminent resources? And second, how many more students will we allow to leave middle school unprepared for high school academics? The financial issue is a structural deficit that increases year by year as certificated salaries and benefits outstrip revenue. The primary contributor is overstaffing of teachers in order to operate multiple middle schools. I hear continuously that parents and others in the community question whether the district has a financial problem because they hear confusing and mixed messages from us. If I were in the audience, rather than sitting in this chair, I would have that same doubt. After all, Mel Spitz says we're on a trajectory toward insolvency, while Howard Goldstein says the district is in excellent financial condition. And the assistant superintendent for business agrees with him. So here are the relevant facts. 2 months ago, staff presented a first interim budget which was adopted by the board and approved by LACO. That budget forecast a $4 million operating deficit in this current school year and assumed that certificated salaries and benefits would be reduced by $5 million next year, which would result in operating surpluses in that upcoming year and thereafter. By adopting that budget, this school board committed to substantially reduce the teaching staff next year. Making good on that commitment would require approval of a detailed plan for reconfiguration, followed by the issuance of pink slips next month. But that commitment by the board is non-binding, and we have not heard support for that from a majority of the board. If certificated staffing will not be substantially reduced in the upcoming school year, the second interim budget, which I think is due for submission to LACO next month, will differ substantially from the first interim. It will project operating deficits in the current year and next year, totaling around $7 to $8 million for the 2 years, reducing our reserves from $17 million to around $9 or $10 million, and further reducing the reserves to $4 or $5 million after the following year. LACO will not accept that budget. Instead, they will require that we reduce expenditures to eliminate the deficit. By the time we receive that notification, we are going to be very hard-pressed to satisfy LACO's requirement. Reconfiguration to 3 middle schools would not reduce staffing anywhere near sufficient to resolve the operating deficit issue. At least one of my colleagues last week advocated closing one of our schools. To do that without a firm commitment to reopen it as a dedicated middle school in the following year will amount to permanent closure, giving permanency also to our substandard middle school educational program. It will also result in increased class sizes at the 3 surviving schools. So in conclusion, making the wrong decision is easy to do, but living with the consequences can be very hard. Mr. Margot once said the same thing differently. He said, "We keep shooting ourselves in the foot." Board members Korbatov and Goldstein will be termed out and gone in November. But Noah Margot and Isabel Hacker and Mel Spitz will be here in the hot seat, saddled with the consequences of reneging on that assumption in the first interim budget. So I am appealing to Mr. Margot and Mrs. Hacker. Let's commit this Board of Education to reconfiguration to 1 middle school as soon as a smooth transition can be assured by staff in a comprehensive action plan. It is clearly the right thing to do. We can't afford to delay, and there is no good alternative for resolving our educational and financial issues. Thank you.
First of all, I want to start off by saying thank you, Dr. Breggy, for the presentation that was requested of you last week. I think it's clear just by looking at the examples that you delineated with honors math and honors English that there would be really no benefit to going from 3 to 2, from 4 middle schools to 3K middle schools. I want to start off by saying that last week some members of the board, including myself, expressed interest about wanting to obtain more information about the 7th through 12th grade model. This week the board learned that it would take approximately 7 years to plan for such a model. This 7th to 12th grade model now seems so far away, and unfortunately appears not to be a solution in the short-term near future. And it possibly could not be a way to resolve the issues that this district is facing at this very present moment. My position is that we need to go to a dedicated middle school, and here is why. I believe we must implement the recommendations provided by the superintendent, his cabinet, present and past educators, and members of the FFST to move towards a dedicated middle school. We must also take into account the anecdotal testimonies provided by our students who have experienced a subpar preparation going into high school. A middle school would provide students in grades 6 through 8 with richer curriculum, educational vitality, more electives, more middle school opportunities. We must enrich the middle school experience with dynamic programs that better prepare our students for high school. By going to a middle school, the district would be more fiscally efficient. The current status quo is not working for this important student population and for this district. Sure, settling for 3 K-8s has some cost savings, but this would not resolve the issues of critical mass that we are challenged with, and these additional dollars would only continue to fund more of what we currently have, and this simply cannot be acceptable. This is even more apparent today after today's presentation, as we have studied that the #1 obstacle in standing in the way from achieving a comprehensive middle school schedule with enriched offerings is the current low enrollment numbers that we currently have, even if we go from 4 to 3 K-8s. Adjacent communities are innovating the delivery of education in so many ways, giving their students the educational edge that we are failing to provide our very own middle school students. This is our opportunity. We need to encourage ourselves to have the courage and the vision to move forward for the sake of our students and school district by going to a dedicated middle school. Thank you.
Dr. Breggy. What's that? No, I'm good. Dr. Breggy, Mr. Seaman, I truly appreciate your analysis. To my board, leaders lead, they don't mislead. We seem to have an issue of comparing apples to oranges in this district. What is the purpose of audited actuals, and what are they used for? We're comparing budgets and projections to audited actuals. Last week, I demonstrated and presented our audited actuals. I didn't make that up. That comes from our audit reports from Moss Levy and Hartzman. For the past 5 years, we have not had a deficit budget. We've been audited, correct?
Wrong.
Each and every year, we have audited actuals. Have they showed a deficit in those actuals?
Last year.
Mr. Spitz,
No.
he's asking, excuse me, Mr. Spitz, he's asking LaTanya.
In order to not confuse anyone
Right.
any further, I would like not to answer that.
Fine.
I'm only saying that because what,
Well,
this, you do know that, but there's two different standards, as I've explained
So
before.
LaTanya, explain the two standards.
Absolutely, thank
Okay.
you. Budgeting for K-12 public school district is based upon the California Department of Education standardized account code structure. That's the California Department of Ed. They tell us how to put our budget together. They tell us how to code the money, what resources to spend it out of, how to code our expenditures, things like that. The audit is based upon the California State K-12 Audit Manual, which is from the California State Treasurer's Department, John Chang's office. It's a different standard. So in the audit, he codes revenues. For example, we coded by Saks the payoff of the Doheny House as an expenditure. They don't code it, that revenue or that expenditure, in our current budget. They make it a expense against capital. So the numbers don't match up because you have two different branches of government dictating how to report the data. So in answer to Mr. Spitz's question and Mr. Goldstein, We have had deficit spending in the prior year and the year after that. There is definite spending, but we do not have a deficit budget because we have healthy reserves. Our reserves are still 19%. So the two branches of government report the same money differently. So you can look at a revenue line that is in SACs, that is the way that the California State Department of Education wants in that revenue line, and you can look at our audit and have a revenue line, and they are different because these organizations want that revenue reported differently.
Let's cut to the chase. With that said, and thank you for explaining that, because I understand what Mr. Spitz was talking about, and I understand what I was talking about. Now, for the rest of the world, not this school district, but the rest of the world, like Standards or Moody's, what do they look to? When we go out for a bond and we put our reputation, our financial reputation on the line, what are they looking at? Our budgets and projections or our audited actuals?
Our audit report are what our credit rating, which is one of the highest credit ratings for a school district, is based upon our audited financial report by Moss Levy.
Great, thank you. Now, Mr. Seaman, let me talk about the presentation. And your presentation, as I understand it, was premised on the middle school philosophy. And if I understand the presentation last week, the middle school philosophy speaks to 150 students per grade level team. Is that correct? So essentially, the presentation you gave, and I appreciate it, but that's premised on a dedicated middle school. We want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, so everybody understands that.
No, so the presentation in which we just gave, to reach the critical mass of being able to offer the middle school philosophy with a single dedicated algebra teacher per grade level, a single dedicated science teacher per grade level, so they can wrap and offer the social emotional support for their students, but also team around academic support would be close to 150, if not over.
150, okay, and that's per grade level.
Yes.
Okay. So that your presentation's premised on that as a middle school philosophy.
Correct.
I want that explained to the audience, so we're actually comparing apples to apples when we do this. So with that said, I know a question was brought up because Mr. Margo asked, and he goes, how do we have 150 per grade level if we contracted with our educators at 145? And then there was a discussion that was had last week, and there was a statement made that it's true that you could have grade levels in the middle schools for middle school philosophy, and you've seen them at 90 students, up to 120, and obviously the middle school philosophy is 150, but they do work at 90.
Correct.
Okay.
We would have to add additional staff members to be able to support that.
Right, and that's kind of the idea. So with additional staff members, you have more options, you have more courses, honors, more courses for electives. So the presentation overestimates enrollment for the middle school philosophy by approximately 50 or 60 students per grade level. Okay. And the middle school philosophy is 150 students, and that's what this presentation
The middle school philosophy isn't just like a certain number of students. The middle school philosophy is about wraparound. So you have a dedicated 6th grade math teacher. You have a 6th grade English teacher, 6th grade science, 6th grade social studies, and that's all they teach is like 6th grade or 7th grade or 8th grade.
And the recommended middle school philosophy model says you should have 150 per grade level, approximately. I know we discussed it.
It could be 120 to 150.
Okay.
It fluctuates.
And my point being is historically, in arcades, over 85 out of the 90 years, we've had about 800 students per K-8 site. Each K-5 site, we've had 500 students during that time, and each grade level 6 through 8, when we were running 4 K-8s, we had approximately 300, about 100 students per grade level, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So essentially, historically, 85 of the last 90 years, when our K-8 model was working in grades 6, 7, and 8, we had about 100 students per grade level. And the reason it worked is because we had accountability, we had enrollment, and we had the resources to provide. About 10 years ago, this district, accountability probably went out the window 25 years ago to some degree. Enrollment went down over the last 10 years, and resources were taken out over the last 10 years. That's the issues we're facing right now. That's what we're looking to put back into our K-8s, and specifically grades 6, 7, and 8. That's what this discussion is truly about. When you talk about what's going on here, we look at, for over 90 years, our K-8 model has served generations of Beverly Hills residents well. How well? Just look to the accomplishments of our student board member, Jonathan Artall, and all the remarkable students that have spoken during public comment over the past weeks. I fully appreciate why Mr. Artall, his colleagues at ASB, the Highlights editorial board, and other students have matriculated from our K-8 system over the past 5 years, who express their preference for a dedicated middle school. Those students are most aware that they did not have the robust educational opportunities during their middle school years. There's no doubt. I think every one of us sitting up here, and probably most of the audience and parents, agree with that if you've had a middle school child. Opportunities for effective learning should always be the objective of our school district. Every parent wants this for his or her child, and every child deserves no less. With 4 K-8s, there are just not enough students to run robust programming and opportunities for students in the middle grades. I think all of us up here have expressed that. Our staff has expressed that. If you've had middle school students in the last 10 years go through this, I think you can agree. It's not just electives that are impacted, but core programming as well. The presentation touches on it. Under our current K-8 configuration, we only have enough students to support one section of honors math and one section of honors English. If a student is accepted into an honors course, for example, honors math, and is offered during another course like French, the student is compelled to decide between taking an honors course or taking a world language. Under our current K-8 configuration, we have students that cannot take band or choir when they move up a level in honors course the following year. But that's not the only issues. Under our current K-8 configuration, we also have issues with English language programs. Due to low middle grade enrollment, we can only accommodate one section of EL support for each K-8. If a student is identified as EL, they often do not have an option to take any other course when their EL class is offered. By consolidating our middle grades, the district could offer additional sections of core classes to allow students to adjust their schedules to access honors courses, enhance and expanded electives. That elective wheel that I talked about that was here when I went here in the 1970s, and many of you experienced. EL support, intervention programs, and consolidation will allow sites the flexibility to better assist with situations of harassment and bullying when students need to be separated into another class. Some of us on the board may hold a different view from that of the FFST and the superintendent. My assessment is grounded in data founded on the analyses and conclusions of educational experts such as the School Services of California, on professional demographic studies, forecasts and enrollment trends, attendance matrices, and the very real constraints of our district construction program. Last week, I discussed relocating Hawthorne students. I also discussed the feasibility of relocating students in Horace Mann middle grades. 2 weeks ago, if you were here or watching at home, I discussed the feasibility of relocating El Rodeo students and the feasibility of converting Beverly Vista to a dedicated middle school. As a trustee, I am looking at every school and open to every option. I remind the community that it was Mrs. Korbatoff, Mr. Margo, and I that voted to place Measure Y on the November 2016 ballot to renovate Hawthorne into a state-of-the-art K-8 school, to complete El Rodeo, and to continue the second phase of construction at the high school. In fall 2016, I attended several Hawthorne PTA meetings and Hawthorne construction meetings where district staff presented renovation plans. At those meetings, abatement of asbestos, lead paint, lead pipes, and seismic upgrades were all discussed. Last week, I referenced those same abatement and seismic issues, not as scare tactics, but to explain some of the reasons for the necessity of the renovations of Hawthorne's 104-year-old buildings. During the campaign to pass Measure Y, I stood out in front of every school, including Hawthorne, every week over many months to explain to parents and community members why the district required a construction bond. The residents of Beverly Hills listened and overwhelmingly supported the bond measure. Measure Y received 64% of the vote. If either Mrs. Hacker or Mr. Spitz had also voted to place the bond on the ballot instead of actively campaigning against it, Measure Y would have passed. The long-term construction plan of the board before Dr. Breggy joined the district or Mrs. Hacker or Mr. Spitz was elected was the complete construction of El Rodeo and the high school and renovate Hawthorne. To renovate Hawthorne, it will necessitate a new bond to be passed. and the site to be closed for 3 years. At some point in the future, Hawthorne will be renovated, and every student at Hawthorne will be displaced to other school sites. I'm a pragmatist. Mr. Spitz is right. There is an election this November, and the district may be one board member away from becoming a dedicated middle school district. If the board gives direction tonight for a new dedicated middle school, it would take approximately 5 years to plan, receive DSA approval, bid, and construct. And that presumes we actually pass a new bond this year. If the board gives direction tonight for a 7-12 school model, it would take over 7 years to plan, receive DSA approval, bid, and construct. And again, that presumes, 1, we pass a new bond this year, and 2, looming subway construction does not interfere with our high school construction plans. However, neither option would address the immediate needs of current students in middle grades. I am confident that if we were to consolidate to 3 K-8s at some point in the future, our community will continue to support the K-8 model. 7 out of 10 parents surveyed by the FFST stated they felt the current K-8 model was meeting their students' needs. I strongly suspect that the 30% that did not were parents of middle school students. I firmly believe that once our district construction program is completed and all our facilities look and function as schools you would expect to find in Beverly Hills, and when the quality of education is second to none, families will return to this district. No matter what the outcome of our discussion on reconfiguration, I again ask my colleagues to give the direction to reinvest in education by restoring accountability, by adding a director of primary education, a director of secondary education. Accountability matters. To restore full-time counselors at each of the K-8 sites, to add a library media teachers, to institute a version of the elective will, and in light of the ever-growing incidence of gun violence, to enhance security throughout all 5 schools by restoring our school resource officers. If my colleagues decide not to take any action tonight for next year, then I ask them to consider that there are 265 students that transferred out of Horace Mann when construction commenced. That's why they left. 104 students transferred to BV, 101 students transferred to Hawthorne, and 64 students transferred to ER. Perhaps we can give direction to survey the parents of those 265 students to see if now that construction is completed at Horace Mann, they would like to return back, where they will find 21st century learning environments, state-of-the-art technology, science labs, digital media libraries, multi-purpose room, and a new outdoor field. Let us not wait to improve the quality of education. There are actions we can take immediately. Others will require time, a new bond to be passed, and a new board to manage it. 7 years ago, this district was horribly divided over the permit issue. Let's not allow the discussion of how to best enhance our schools and improve educational opportunities of our students divide us. Our decisions must bring us together as a community for the greater good of our children. At some point, families will make sacrifices like those made by Beverly Vista families in the 1990s, like those made by Horace Mann families over the past 4 years, and those currently being made by El Rodeo families today. One thing is certain, children are more resilient than their parents. It is not lost on me that the long-term sustainability of the BHUSD depends on our connections between students, parents, staff, and community. Building strong relationships and rebuilding trust is most important. Our common ground is our children. They bind us as a community that ever strives for high achievement based on equity and parity. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. I'm tired of this, actually. Thank you for the presentation, staff. I appreciate it because it helped me realize that that's not the way to go. I know Mr. Altar, you said it so eloquently, but I just simply say, no, I'll pass. Okay. Mr. Spitz, I'm so happy you invoked my name so many times tonight. It's almost like Voldemort. I would say, though, that to your comment about the K-8 model not working, I don't agree with that. I've said 2 weeks ago, I'm not ready to throw the towel in on the K-8 model yet. I think our issue is the population and resources and fixing that may or may not fix the problem and then force us to continue the conversation about either a dedicated middle school or not. Anyway, I have some thoughts that I wrote down, so I'm going to read them. They're not as lengthy as my colleague, but you know, we're kind of getting all comfortable listening to Mr. Goldstein now. It's kind of like a warm blanket.
Yeah, I only have a few months left. You know, I have to get it all in.
Okay. So first, I want to remark on how impressed I am with the way that the board and the community came together and is coming together to discuss the issues that are facing us. It felt like the first real honest conversation that we've had with the community since I've sat here. I hope that we can get stakeholders from all the schools into the room in the future and have these frank conversations where the community shares their thoughts and ideas and the board can deliberate in front of you. During the past week, I continued to receive emails. No surprise there, right? So this time the emails were of a slightly different nature. Most of them thanked the board for their constructive deliberation and, of course, not closing an entire school come this August. But a similar theme that permeated throughout the communiques kept referring to teachers and evaluations. I'll spare you the details, but the gist related to something that one of our own staff members publicly spoke about at last week's meeting. You see, I would have to agree with Ms. Peterson on her assessment that teachers are not the problem, but I would say that teaching is. There are a lot of amazing teachers in this district, and those that aren't the problem. They don't hire themselves. They don't evaluate themselves. They don't program their own professional development, and they don't release themselves. Administration does that. So I want to encourage and support our administration to hopefully find some clarity and direction on this mission of excellence. To the question, if there is an issue with instruction, why is the board discussing reconfiguration, closing schools, consolidation, budgets, and so on? Okay, I'm going to answer that. Yes, you're right. All of those other fixes that we have been discussing the last few weeks, whether temporary or long-term, do not fix the epidemic of inconsistent quality of instruction. So it doesn't make them less of issues to confront, though. It's like having high cholesterol and diabetes. Fixing one doesn't fix the other, and you have to fix both. So the one other element of the emails that I've received asked the question as to why this district is losing students and how we have to improve to bring them back. Well, we do not. We have to improve for the students that are here. If residents whose children attend elsewhere see this improvement and re-enroll, great. But we are a basic aid district. And the truth is, the more is not merrier. And that is where a plummeting population and consolidation comes in. So more and more I have thought about the FFST recommendation about taking 1 year to really sink our teeth in and create a fully vetted plan that cannot backfire. Right? And here's what I came up with. A plan. Tonight, we may or may not take a vote that next year, like it or not, we repurpose a campus. We can let common sense and logic dictate which one. But I agree with parents that I have now spoken to this last week who seem to be able to swallow that pill much easier. It'll still suck, and another year may put a large dent into our reserves, but it has to be done. Parents really should have received more notice if a school was to close this year, at least enough notice to allow them to apply out of district as a courtesy. I don't advocate for people to do that, but that's their right. Waiting a year will also give the district time to find a way to successfully use a vacated campus through the proper channels and time frame so it does not sit vacant longer than necessary. I do say that rough waters are ahead, but they will be guided by this quote-unquote lighthouse, and that we will find safe harbor. But I do believe a repurposing is a necessity. The numbers are simply not there to keep 4 campuses open in the long run. And I implore this board to immediately make that decision and notify parents and staff well in advance. I also think that we should explore the 7-12 model. We, the board, should immediately convene a committee, the board, because it is our purview, and that this committee will spend whatever time they need digging deep into a longer-term plan that the board can agree on. I believe the 7-12 model answers the concerns of the FFST and the superintendent as well as the community at large. A K-6 7-12 model can keep our students down to one major transition. It can take advantage of resources and facilities on one campus instead of having them spread to 2 or more. And it will give our 7th and 8th graders academic opportunities that they simply couldn't get on their own campuses by allowing them to enroll in high school level courses. If we pull our resources into exploring that option, along with the dedicated middle school option that examine both the academic, financial, and facility, we can create an incredible district. I really believe that. So here is my plan. 1, immediately figure out which campus is to be closed in the fall of 2019. That's 2019. And notify the community yesterday. 2, begin bringing balance and excellence to our current configuration through staffing and investments back into the middle school program. Some of the things Dustin was talking about. Take advantage of those now. 3, this board needs to create a committee to research not only the feasibility, but the advantages and disadvantages of a 7-12 option or dedicated middle school option. In order for that committee to succeed, I would suggest we have the facility department has to look into physically putting a 7-12 campus here that doesn't interrupt the current flow of construction, which fortunately has been delayed by DSA. 4, when the committee completes their work, notify the community of their findings. Whether we stay 3 K-8s or go another way, we will need to build and therefore develop a plan and draw up the next construction bond, because without it, we can't finish the high school, all of El Rodeo, and Hawthorne. No matter what happens, Hawthorne will need to be rebuilt, because if we succeed with everything else, we will need it. Your neighbors and your neighbors and your neighbors who send their kids to Windward and Archer and Milken will be clamoring to get back into this district. And we will need to have the vision to support possibly 4 campuses in the future. So that's my plan. And this is a plan that can take years to successfully execute. So in the meantime, let's not forget the real issue I started with, classroom instruction. To that, I implore our administration to get on that right now. So, in summation, the FFST, I'm pretty close on board with that. I'm not yet sold on the single middle school. I do believe in 2019, as the FFST recommended, we should consolidate to 3 campuses. Because in the future, if we do a dedicated middle school, we're only going to need 2 K-5s. We're not going to need 3, unless there's a huge uptick in the population. So I think these are directions. I am stating them clearly. Hopefully everyone has heard. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I don't want to go off a tangent. I don't think it's helpful when fellow board members tell other board members they're about to leave in 10 months. I think it doesn't really help the discussion, the dialogue. It certainly doesn't present a mutually respectful dialogue. So, Mr. Spitz, as long as I'm here, I have a voice, I have a vote, I've earned it. I ran twice. I spent a lot of my own time, money, and effort. I've sacrificed family time, work time to do this work for free with a full heart and a clean conscience. So I'd appreciate if you would not speak that way, because you could only incentivize me to run again, and you wouldn't want that. I know you could say that again. Yeah, we have something in common. Mr. Blake, could I ask you to speak? I have some questions for you. For the public, I just want you to understand that what has bothered me about this entire process is that there are, like time, like life, like money, unless you're Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, it's finite. We have 4 K-8s. One is gutted and under significant delay towards more construction. One is about to finish, one is done, and one hasn't even been touched. This is not rocket science. This is not SpaceX, folks. This is just 4 K-8s. So before we go off on these crazy tangents, do we close the school? Do we move kids? Do we consolidate? Shouldn't we know if we have the physical space? shouldn't we ask the most fundamental questions that apparently have not really been asked in any depth, at least not of me or not from me? So, Mr. Blake, could I ask you some questions, and please feel free to go in any direction on your answers. I absolutely do not know what you know, but I'm going to ask you politely just to tell us quickly your background and your resume, so people know when they listen to you that you really know what you're talking about.
Yikes. I've been involved in what we would call major construction since December 28, 1974. And at that time, I was lucky. I went to work for a company that specialized in building the high-rises in most of the downtown core. My first project when I was a kid was a Wells Fargo 48-story, and I worked with joint ventures with Tishman Construction all up and down Wilshire Boulevard for 20-story buildings, high-rise construction. I left corporate life, went out on my own. My responsibility when I left, I was a chief operating officer for a company that had 5,000 union employees in the field. I was 26 years old. I was way too young. So I had a knack for understanding drawings and details in construction. So I went out on my own and decided to be a developer. And I liked being an owner because I thought the owner had the best potential of making a decision that changes the outcome. As a result of that, I was able to develop in Washington, Oregon, California, Japan, and China. My experience drew the attention of the Commerce Department in the mid-90s, and I was asked to represent the United States to re-engineer a construction company in Japan. Ended up being the second largest construction company in Japan from the ground up, to become an American-style methodology, which I didn't think existed, but they listened to me. I've also attended 7 of the Type 1 cities in China, representing the United States, and developers, private developers here in the United States, with an opportunity to collaborate and do developments in Japan using American methodologies. Apparently, I wrote some books for the Chinese and for the Japanese on everything from acquisition, property acquisition, entitlement, through all the way through how to hire a framing foreman. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it unless somebody asked me to write it. That's how it happened.
Mr. Blake, so you have a lot of experience in the private sector.
Yes.
What's your experience in the public sector, such as school districts?
With school districts, I was asked in 1999 to come out of retirement again, well, the first time, and at the time, Irvine School District had some construction problems, and I was asked by 3 superintendents at that time to consider finding solutions for public works, problems being delays, overruns, schedule issues, and what would I do basically if I were king? And I said, well, I'm a developer. My wallet's on the table 24/7. If I'm not successful at budget control, schedule control, and legal implications, I'm out of business. So I was asked by 3 superintendents to create a business that would provide the service of public works K through 12 methodology to achieve no change orders, no delays, and no lawsuits. That was over $1 billion ago, and I retired again and was asked by Terry Tao to come back and look at this district.
So, thank you, Mr. Blake. So I want the public to understand that he has definitely a deep reservoir of knowledge. You've looked at all of our campuses, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You've walked the campuses.
Yes.
You've assessed the campuses.
Yes.
Okay. El Rodeo right now was gutted, except for Building E, which is the middle school building.
Correct.
And those kids are in cottages, pods, whatever you want to call them. And they're there. And as I understand, that school cannot take more capacity, or you would literally have to start staggering, people coming on and off the campus, construction teacher, literally parking, everything would be completely upended. Is that correct?
Well, specifically for El Rodeo, talking about that
Yeah.
site, we know, we have some information that there's a high-rise that's going to be built, or at least a 15-story, adjacent to the back part of the property, which has to do with traffic and construction activity. For that particular site, when the abatement was done, the staff parking and student activities and contractors, which was nowhere near what will be there for the construction phase. If you add more students, it's not so much do they have the capacity, but during construction, it's already at the limit from our perspective of being able to have lay-down areas, be able to have a crane, be able to have activity. What we're saying is more students would necessitate that we would go to a program where we shuttle staff and we shuttle contractors on a daily basis.
Okay. So I would say that, in theory, what you could put on the campus is if there's 20 seats in a room, or contractually you can have 22 or 23 kids, and there's 4 or 5 missing, you could fill that classroom. But you wouldn't want to necessarily add more classrooms.
Correct.
Okay.
That would be optimum to not do that during construction.
Okay. And construction is 60 months from soup to nuts. Every single thing. A, B, C, D, Building E, and then all the adjacent
Site work.
areas, the site, as well as parking, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that's if there isn't a problem with North Korea, if there isn't a problem with an earthquake, that's if there isn't some extraordinary situation, we're going to be done in 60 months, right?
And I think that I need to explain a bit. When we say 60 months, there's 3 phases. Phase 1
Right.
is A, B, C, and D.
Which we're in now.
That's 30
Right.
months. And then there's the rest, the building construction in addition after that, and some site work. That's where the 60 months comes from. It's not the first phase that we talked about, so we're not
Right.
confused.
Right, so
60
it's,
months
it's
total.
it's total, and in theory, there could be some return of more kids to the school after, when you're building the last 12 months, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's say 48 months, we really shouldn't be bringing a large group of kids back to that school.
It would be optimum to
Optimal.
finish the construction.
Okay. Horace Mann. Horace Mann is almost completed, and it has room, I'm told, for an additional comfortably 200 kids, 250, I was told.
I think what we've reported from, again, we're talking about a contractual.
Right.
If we look at a class and how many head counts and contract, we've spoken with staff, is that to answer that question, that would be a program
Exactly.
or educational or those kinds of things. But I think generally, the answer is yes to 200.
So what I understand, and, we've had this discussion a while back, you would lay down the programming and the curriculum needs and the children over the campus and see where everything plugs in, because you could physically fit perhaps kids in the campus, but you couldn't necessarily have enough science labs or enough other resource rooms to accommodate programming, correct? So you
Correct.
have to figure all that out.
If we just said contractually, generally, you could put 1,000 kids in each of the campuses.
But it doesn't mean it's functional or going to
Correct.
deliver education.
The
Okay.
matrix would have to come through curriculum and programming.
All right. So for the purposes of just let's try to do a sketch of this, you could put 200 to 250 more kids programmatically, legally, literally at Horace Mann, in theory.
In theory,
You could
yes.
put whatever we have to fill up the existing classrooms at El Rodeo is 30, 40, 50 kids. I can't imagine it's significantly more. Maybe it's 50, 60. I don't think it's hundreds. I don't think we have hundreds of kids missing out of existing classrooms. Am I right, Mr. Allen? Okay. So now we're down to Hawthorne. Okay. So Hawthorne has how many kids? I've heard people say 500. I saw a slide that said 650 right now. Does anyone know how many are in Hawthorne? 624. You had told me 500, Mrs. Hacker. It's 6.
578 is what I saw on one of the slides.
Okay, well, I saw 6 something. All right, 624. So let's try to work backwards as if we were running a business. We have 624 kids. And we empty out the school a year from now. Let's just assume that a board would do that. Where are 624 kids going? Isn't that a fundamental question that someone should ask sometime soon? So I'm actually asking it, and I'm saying, and it's not a rhetorical comment, they have nowhere to go. Because I don't have anywhere that 624 kids are going to land. BV is almost, I don't know, 50, 75 more spaces. So I think that we've started this discussion completely wrong. In a perfect world, Mr. Spitz wants a dedicated middle school, as does Mrs. Hacker, and that may be very well and good. And the FFST team, all 19 of them minus Marvin, want a dedicated middle school, including the staff, the administration. Where are they going? I mean, I mean, it feels like I'm Dorothy and I'm clicking my heels and I get to go back to Kansas. But guess what, guys? This is not the right time to make these changes when you have one school gutted under construction, one in dire need of full construction like Hawthorne, one about to be finished, and one that's finished. I just think this was a bad time to even start this. Now, as a board member, I think it's great. Thank you. I think it's great to look at how do we deliver better education. I couldn't agree more. I think it's great to look at why aren't we doing as well in the middle school? I think these are all excellent questions. But if all you have is a hammer, then everything's a nail. So if every question leads you to a dedicated middle school, that's not a process I trust. Hence, I don't trust the process because it's been looking at the wrong information. We physically can't do these things. It takes 5 years to make a middle school, correct, Mr. Blake?
That's correct.
It takes 7 years to make a pie in the sky 7 to 12. I'm going to ask all of you something. I'm the mother of 3 daughters. Do you think my husband and I would have placed a 12-year-old on a campus with an 18-year-old man? No. And I'm really sorry for being gender insensitive. I have 3 girls. My husband went to that campus. I wouldn't want those girls next to my husband's friends when they were 11th and 12th graders, and they're all wonderful men. But it's something not smart, not appropriate about that. And we're not on a 50-acre campus like in Texas, okay, where their driveways are longer than the state of Israel, and people can be on one end and then on another. We're on 20 acres, and much of it's tiered. And we're fighting a subway, and we have to close down oil wells. So whoever thinks we need to think about a 712 campus at that campus needs to go to Texas for a while. Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Blake.
There's a piece of information I'd like to share that is part of the calculation for, again, I'm speaking for facilities and construction, not educational or those implications. They're tied, but here's something I think I need to communicate. El Rodeo, A, B, C, and D, and building B1 and B2 are currently...
B1 and B2 are at the high school,
just
for everyone to know.
That's what we have in our wallet currently to build, and that's, unless something happens that hasn't happened, that's where the train is going, is to get in position to finish those 2 buildings and finish El Rodeo A, B, C, and D. However, when it comes to Hawthorne, aside from a new bond, here's how it is going to happen from a construction perspective. When you can imagine that May, we have chairs and desks and wonderful IT things on the wall, and we're ready to open a brand new A, B, C, and D at El Rodeo. let's imagine for a minute that's in May.
But it would be 4 years from this May.
Correct.
Okay.
So my charge, my commission, is to keep construction moving. What that means is at Hawthorne, we will not be able to phase construction at Hawthorne. We'll have to take Hawthorne offline. Because
Mr. Blake, you told me when you mentioned that to me a while ago that it has to go offline. I asked you why, and you explained to me about hazmats as well as other things. For everyone's knowledge, on 2011, the board worked with, I believe it was Nelson Kayabyab, who was here then with Bernard Brothers, and we put up we did hazmat analysis at every school site that was going to be under construction. The Hawthorne hazmat report is up there. Thankfully, everything is encapsulated, but it's so pervasive, and Mr. Blake will explain it. Kids have to get out. And we can expedite construction, save some money, save time. But where are they going? They have to go to 3 finished campuses, and it'll be tight. And quite frankly, El Rodeo may be left with a few pods. These are the things people have to tell you truthfully. So if you want to go on, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
that's what I wanted to make sure on the table, the reality of what will happen. And when El Rodeo's completed, A, B, C, and D, there may be time lags on the site because you may need to leave some portables, but Hawthorne will have to be taken offline to do the construction. The reason is the hazmat is on the outside of the building, on the inside of the building, it's everywhere, which means it'll look like has anyone been inside El Rodeo recently? Or in the high school?
It's gutted. It's down to the studs.
It's down to the vapor at the exterior walls, and that's what will have to happen. The way the building is configured and the types of building, there'll be some demo of actual buildings, some older buildings, not the ones we're preserving, but from a construction standpoint, it's not possible to phase it. In other words, hazmat isn't something that, well, let's do this room. See, you can. I mean, the airport does it constantly, but it's extraordinarily expensive. I don't know how
many parents really, Mr. Blake, hazmat, hazardous materials like asbestos and lead, would want their kids around there, even if we said to them that, don't worry, they're sequestered. I personally would not want my kids there. So I would presume most people wouldn't want their kids there. So I don't know, and I wouldn't want to expose them, and I wouldn't want to expose the district to liability. So having said that, if we pass a bond and there's money set aside, we can have a discussion as a community. Do you want to be a dedicated middle school and 3 K-5s? And then the logical thing is to take a campus, most likely Hawthorne, and design it as a dedicated middle school, or do you want to be a K-8, and do you want to boost your K-8 instruction and the model? So this is a bigger discussion. The problem is it's about a year or 2 from now. This is a premature discussion. Now, if you ask me, sitting here as a graduate of a K-8, and my husband and my children getting stellar educations at K-8s, I like the K-8. I want to make it better. I think there are best practices that can be implemented. But I'm not an educator. But I have a sense of what the community wants. And I don't have, and I'm not implying that my fellow board members or community members who are nodding that they want a dedicated middle school. I respect your right to want it. That's fine. I believe the professionals who like it have great reasons. But for me, I'm not going to impose that on thousands and thousands of residents who move here and choose these schools because of the culture and the generational, institutional memory of a K-8. That's what they want. And to quote Ronald Reagan, there's critics and there's box office. The public is box office. I am not here to dictate to you what's best for your children. I don't think board members are here to do that. Now, if you want to empower them to do it, there's an election in November. You can pick someone who wants a dedicated middle school, and you'll have it. You will have it. I have no doubt. Or you can pick people who are going to speak on the subject of a boosted, better K-8 model and put back all the things that were taken out and figure out how to implement it better, and maybe you'll get that vision. But that's going to be a community-based discussion, because I don't believe in forcing people, and the kind of emails I'm getting, you know, people want overwhelmingly the K-8 model. Now, some people don't, and I respect that. It's a bigger, broader discussion for the community to have. But what I found very interesting is, when I went online and I was sent, you know, looking at articles, I mean, I didn't hear the proponent of a dedicated middle school in any way counter what the K-8 people are saying. All these experts from all over the country. The middle school plunge, NYU study, students in K-8 model more academically confident. The case for the L middle school. Revival of the K-8 school. The rise of the L middle school. Focus on the wonder years. Goodbye middle school. This top school's K-8 model works. Stuck in the middle. Impacts of grade configuration of public schools. Attending a middle versus K-8 school matters for student outcomes. Do top dogs rule in middle school? And so on and so on. When I think that I'm given enough empirical data by people who support a dedicated middle school, not telling me I'll save money, not telling me that I'll deliver better education, because I'm hearing from other experts that that's not necessarily the case. And I don't think hope is a plan. So I'm not going to put my faith in other board members who have very strong opinions or one superintendent. With all due respect, I'm just not going to do it. Not here, not now. This is a community-based discussion. These are your children. They're your most precious possessions for as long as you get to keep them. And I can only tell you that this is a very big discussion that should not be imposed on the people of Beverly Hills. As my view, I have a very libertarian view about this. I do not know better for you what's best for your children. That's why you send us here to represent you. You don't send us here to do things that are antithetical to what you want done. So I just would like to say that, Mr. Blake, it's clear, and please correct me, that we don't have anywhere to empty kids out of a year from now, 620 Hawthorne kids or 680, you know, Horace Mann kids, if we have, or 500 Horace Mann kids. There's nowhere to empty out a school and move them out.
The soonest would be completing El Rodeo.
Yeah.
In other words, to answer your question, we're going to have to take Hawthorne offline. So we're going to eventually to have to face that population base and solve that matrix.
But that has to happen when El Rodeo is completely built out.
Yes.
Okay. So I am not personally giving direction to move and empty a school in a year, because that really doesn't make any sense. I might as well tell you that, you know, I'm going to jump off a roof or a ceiling. I mean, this is just nonsense. So I'm personally not giving that direction. Whether to take 6th, 7th, and 8th graders and move them around and displace all these families and all these kids seems to me to be something short of brain damage. So I'm not doing that either. And I don't appreciate that these things weren't looked at in a more comprehensive way. I asked 6 questions, I got to my answers. I don't know why we had to go through this exercise for 4 months and create anxiety and terror in the hearts of, you know, hundreds of parents. So I just like to say that this is a great conversation to have in a year or two, when we know what's going on at these campuses, when we know if we have a bond, when we know if we're actually going to have money to build out Hawthorne. I took a pledge to keep Hawthorne a K-8 when I went out on Measure Y. And that was not a gimmick, and that was not a ruse. I believed it. I still believe it. That's my platform. I want to keep the K-8. I realize whatever it doesn't deliver, the intangibles it gives our children is it's incalculable. That's my opinion. I have successful kids who are happy, well-adjusted, extremely high-performing, and they came out of a K-8. I never heard them tell me they didn't get to do this or that. Whatever they did to the best of their ability. I think that we have to strive for excellence in everything we do, and we can't get stuck on the shiny little things off to the right and the little blingy things off to the left. Keep your schools safe. Keep them clean. Keep your teachers happy. Happy teachers, happy classrooms. Keep your administrators doing what they need to do best. And have an honest dialogue between the school board, the administration, and the community. And not one where it's a one-way street. This is my recommendation, and I know I'm leaving in 9 or 10 months, but I bring to this discussion 8 years. 8 years of being here. And there's been nothing in it for me for 8 years or any of my children. So I speak to you from a point of absolutely that I have no bias in what I say to you. My kids are grown. My third child's almost 16 years old. This is not relevant to me. But I believe it, so I'm telling it to you. I took that vote before the why, measure why, and I take it again today. And someone's going to run in November, and they're going to feel my way, and then they're going to someone who feels the other way. It's up to the community to decide what's the vision of Beverly Hills Unified for the next 50 years. And the last thing I want to say is I have some ideas. I'd like to give direction, and if the board can discuss it. I don't want to pick it up on my phone. It's easier to see it off Thank you, Mr. Blake. I really appreciate your insights. Can I read it for me? Yeah. Yeah.
Taking notes.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question before
sure.
you offer direction?
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is that you're not supporting 712, 68, whatever. I respect that. I'm not there yet either. I need to see a lot more evidence. I'm also hearing that you're not interested in going to a 3K8 model. Is that correct?
You can't go to 3K8 for at least 5 years. You will be at a 3K8
hold on a second.
when Elwerdale comes online and Hawthorne goes offline.
Okay, so in the presentations that both the FFST and the cabinet made, they both proffered a 3K8 model, one this year, one next year. So am I to understand that that offering was on no actual factual basis of whether we can fit the students?
But I think
Hold on a second, I'm not asking Lisa.
But the goal, I think, was on those 2 presentations to get to a dedicated middle school. Am I not correct? Yeah.
Whether you get to it or not, eventually they both proffered the same thing, one year, one the next. My question is it true, and Mr. Blake, you might have to take the podium again, because we love you so much.
So, Noah,
Wait.
what I want to say to you is that whether I want 3 K8s next year or I don't, I can't have it because there's no space.
So what I need to know before I drone on and on is there is no way at all physically, programmatically possible to go down to 3 K8s in 2019?
I do not have the answer for you.
Thank you for being honest.
I have the answer confidently. We can move our students into 3 TK8 buildings.
Okay. So we're hearing
Plenty of room to do that.
2 different things. I'm hearing 2 different things. So
I don't believe it. Sorry, Dr.
Hold on a
Bragg.
second.
That's okay.
Is this, Mr. Blake, since you answered the question that you weren't prepared to answer it right now, you don't know, is that something that can be, is that information that can be acquired or verified?
It needs to be acquired and verified.
Okay.
As I've said before, if can you put generally from a contractual perspective a certain number of kids on each of the campuses based on classrooms and head counts? Yes. But whether or not it can programmatically, whether or not it can be real in terms of the scheduling, that's a decision and a choice or a process that needs to come from the site staff and from the staff to determine that. So there's
Okay, then I will defer. I will defer any recommendation for direction toward that until I know that answer. But I would like to know that answer, and I don't know.
So then I'm going to preface this again. I would say I want to see 4 robust K8s, and I'm not ready to give up on that model.
Okay,
That's what I'm going to say right now.
Okay, Lisa, how are you going to pay for it?
How am I going to
So
pay
Ms.
for
How are you
it?
going to pay for it?
So I'll tell you how I'm
I'd
going to
love
pay
to see
for it.
that. I want nothing more.
Okay, so let me
How are
just
you gonna
say
pay
this
for
to
it?
you. We need to get in closed
You know
because
what?
there's quite a few things that we spend money on that we shouldn't, but they're personnel, and I'm not going to talk about it here and now. Okay? So I want to say that Hawthorne at its height had 685. They're now down to 625. They've lost 50 or 60 kids in 10 years. That's 6 per grade. This is not an attrition, folks.
Mr. Korbatoff, the actuality is that half of the population comes from outside the attendance area. That is
Right, Howard.
You may not.
Okay, Howard, you're absolutely right, but the point being is, here's the point. El Rodeo's almost at capacity, and they're under construction. Hawthorne is very full, whether they're immigrants or not, they're full.
We're not going there.
We're not going there. And then you have BV, which is bursting at the seams happily. And then you have Horace Mann, which is missing approximately 200 kids, and they will come back. You build it and they will come. I believe that. I think this is basically moving, numbers on a chart. We have almost the same amount of kids in the K-8s minus a couple hundred in middle school. And why? The bigger question is why. It's because they're falling off at the high school and then they're leaving in 7th grade. That's the real issue.
Will some of us be able to join the dialogue in time?
Sure, of course. Mr. Spitz.
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you. You have said, Mrs. Korbatoff, that there is absolutely no way that we could go to one dedicated middle school and 3 K-5s within less than several years. That's what I think I heard you say. 5 years.
Yeah, that's what Mr. Blake said
No,
for a
I'm
new
gonna-
dedicated middle
So
school.
I would like to ask Mr. Blake a question, if you please. What I'm going to ask, it may be very, very unpopular with a lot of people, but I want to ask you this question. If we were to reconfigure Beverly Vista to one dedicated middle school with about 920 students, and I'm under the impression that could be done without major construction.
Yes.
That would then leave the other 3 schools with not more students than they have now, but with a slightly smaller number of students. And I just don't understand why somebody would say, there's no way to do this.
Spitz, have you ever dropped off 920 kids at one school site?
Ma'am,
And
it's
traffic?
doable. The way you do it, excuse me, let me
Yeah,
answer.
sure.
The way you do it is, and Beverly Vista has good facilities for that, is you do this. You drop off the 8th graders at one time, and then the 7th graders a half an hour later, and the 7th graders a half an hour later, and that's about 300 each time, and it's doable. All I'm saying is that one dedicated middle school and 3 K-5s is doable, and it's doable a year from now. I think that's the case. And I'm just,
When
I
you're
don't
done,
know-
I'm going to ask you a question about that.
Okay. And I'm just going to ask, I don't know whether you're prepared to answer that question, whether Beverly Vista could, if we wanted to, be turned into a dedicated middle school with about 920 students in it, without major reconstruction. Have you looked at that yet?
No.
Okay. I think that's the only question I have to ask you.
Mr.
I would like to
Spitz,
say-
does it bother you that the community, at least overwhelmingly, from what I see on my email and conversations, does not want it? Does that in any way disturb your line of thinking?
Here's what I'm saying to you. First of all, I don't know whether a majority of the community wants to retain 4 K-8 middle schools. I know a lot do. I know that, and it may be a minority of people in the community who are here to tell us what they think. But I want to tell you this. We are not a board of directors. We are a board of education. I know you know that. And I know that you and I are on the same wavelength when we say we want to improve education in this district throughout. I know, I agree with that, but we are a board of education. First of all, to keep multiple middle schools, you can say it as much as you want. Well, we'll figure out another way of fixing it. There is no other way to provide a first-class education to the number of middle school students we have in multiple schools. And we are a board of education. That's our responsibility. Now, if you want to, that we were elected for this purpose, if you want to turn over our responsibilities to a referendum, fine. It probably is going to happen, because what's going to happen is this. In this year's school board election, the overriding issue will be this. Some candidates will say, if you elect me, I'm going to keep the K-8. And some other candidates will say, I believe in changing, I believe in the advantages and the need to change to one dedicated middle school. And the community will talk, but it's going to be a circus. That's going to be the overwhelming issue in the next school board election. And the people that get elected may not be qualified to sit here, but it'll be the one, maybe it'll be the ones that say, if you elect me, I will keep the K-8. That's not a good enough reason, I don't think. Now, the other thing is this. If we decide, for one reason or another, if for what you have advocated, or if it's for what Mr. Margot has advocated, but we make no changes, and if we are going to stay with 4 K-8s, we're in one hell of a lot of trouble financially with LACO. And because we're not going to make any change. We're not going to change.
Mr. Spitz, I agree that we should never abuse our finances or be ineffective or wasteful. So, LaTanya, could you help the board out and with the superintendent come in and give us some recommendations in next week's closed about some low-hanging fruit, some things we could do to save some money now or in August?
Sorry, Mrs. Korbutov, I just wanted to remind you that I believe that the Finance Committee is going to be convening on Thursday at 3:30 to look at our financials and really declare and confirm the district's position financially. And so my suggestion was going to be that after they convene, if they could come back to this board on Tuesday. I believe we have a meeting next Tuesday, correct? Yes. And if they could publicly state for us and for the community what they find.
Well, are you going to have your second interim by then or no? Because
We won't.
if you're not going to have a second interim,
just,
there's nothing for them to really look at.
Well, the purpose for them, well, they already are convening on Thursday.
I think it's great, but I still want her to come in closed, and I have some questions and some ideas. I've heard you have, we all have good ideas. There's some things we need to change, not necessarily even cut. We need to reorganize and repurpose our money. We have to reallocate.
But I will just say this. Mrs. Korbutov, that's fine. I would like that very much. So we're not making any decisions tonight.
Well,
because we have two issues here. One is educational and one is financial. And we don't understand, I don't think we understand the financial as well as we should to be able to make a decision.
But what we can do, and I've been talking about it for a number of weeks, we can hold our district staff accountable by adding a director of primary education, a director of secondary education. Those are important positions. Other school districts has them. We do not.
Oh, I agree with that.
We can add full-time counselors, whether we have 3 K-8s or 4 K-8s. Part of these issues with bullying and harassment, these things we can make better. Library media techs, it's a combination. It's 21st century education. We can make that those opportunities. Restoring look at the feasibility of restoring our SRO officers. We can make our campuses safer. And I agree, and we talked about that, getting a committee together. Everybody talks about it, so we can give direction for staff to either do it or at least look at it. As to what the configuration will be, obviously we can't put them in where we know enrollment's a problem. I still think that we should still look at the issue of our 6-8 enrollment and see what we can do to better that, to make it work, to give opportunities to our students that they're not getting now. That's really what started this discussion, for me anyways. It wasn't finances, it was educational opportunities for our students in the middle grades.
Well, what is your suggestion on that?
Well, to have staff look at the displacing of students in grades 6 or 8. I'm not saying which ones, which students, which sites, but if we don't get enrollment up in those grade levels, we can't operate, and it doesn't matter how well the accountability and what resources we have.
But the presentation shows that there's no benefits to scheduling and offering
based
more.
Based on a middle school philosophy, 150 students. I mean, it will help.
But the numbers, I'm sorry. The numbers don't say that, Howard. I understand what you wanted to say, but it doesn't say that in the presentation presented today.
Plus with surveying surveying the parents of students left Horace Mann for construction in 2014. We know that. Our board got those applications, or the district got those applications that the parents want to leave. They don't want to be in construction, and we all got that. We kept the numbers artificially low. We did do that. There are 101 students at one site, 104 at another, 64 at another that are in the Horace Mann area. It's worth asking those parents, now that construction's over at the school, would you think about coming back to your home school? It's an easy question. It's a survey out to the parents. It's one email to the parents to see build up to numbers. We may solve the problem right there and then.
Mr. Goldstein, I still have to ask the question. If we know that our population is severely decreased from when we were operating 4 K-8s, if we know we have an entire school's less of people, fewer students now, and if school services came in last year and said, yeah, you could do K-8 model, but you shouldn't be operating 4 campuses, you can't do it. You can't do 4 campuses anymore, okay? So if we've had outside agencies, we had Davis Demographics come and tell us our numbers and our demographics. We know these things.
Well, you don't have to tell me.
Do I have at least 2 other colleagues to ask staff the question, can we physically consolidate to 3 K-8s? Do I have support to ask that question even, or we don't even want the answer to that? Because if you don't want the answer to that, fine, but you better win the lottery.
I thought we asked the question through the study of FFST, and I thought that we asked the question through the question and answers that we receive as board members on a weekly basis since we started this conversation. The answer, I mean, obviously today we got 2 different answers,
right,
but I think the answer has been answered, Mr. Margot. So it's not that we haven't asked the question. I think the answer is.
Well, what they've said was that physically, at capacity to contract, you can have 3 K-8s. Programmatically, I think you both agree that you have to look at, everybody agrees that you have to look at sites, staffing, and what's going on with the spaces to answer that question.
Hence the word that I've been saying, the feasibility of looking at all this.
So we don't have an answer to the question, is it feasible to consolidate to 3 K-8s?
We've been asking that question for
I mean, but once again.
But you don't want to anyway.
No, it's not that I don't want to anyway. No, I really don't like being put in this gilded box that I don't want to know what's going on in the world.
We can't keep hanging the community out to dry. We have to decide something.
I'm not hanging them out to dry. I'm saying something very emphatically. You have one campus ground down, stopped because of stalled construction, about to start up, that is hammered. You have another one that's 104 years old that needs to get constructed, and you have one finishing and one that's finished. What part of we don't have enough space doesn't anyone understand?
Okay, so let me read this to you because this is from staff's answers to the question.
Staff is not construction.
This is, I'm sorry, facility staff. answering the question.
Right.
Okay.
I saw those answers.
Good. The
They
complete
do
modern.
not talk about curriculum or programming.
I
They don't talk
understand.
about cafeterias and libraries and auditoriums.
I want
They don't
to-
talk about any of that.
I would like to read something. I agree. My observation for best construction development. Temporarily, it was off the question, what about closing El Rodeo during the construction? Okay? Temporarily taking El Rodeo offline, removing the students and building out the entire school in one phase would reduce the construction overall project timeframe to approximately 42 months as opposed to 60 months. This would result in an approximate savings of $2.3 million in general conditions and supervision savings. Remove the portables would be $549,000 savings, plus a possible 1.5% or $1.2 million on construction efficiency and economy of scale savings. These estimates do not take into consideration general fund and staff cost reductions. So, for the community to know is if it were feasible to consolidate to 3 K-8 campuses, at least there's people asking the questions. We're not targeting one specific school. We would really like to look at the options. So that question was asked and answered. I'm reading you the answer to the question. So people are informed. I'd like to know by next week or yesterday if it's even possible programmatically or feasibly to go down to 3 K-8s, because then that will end that discussion, yay or nay, and there'll either be support for it or there won't be, and we can move on.
So I want to just piggyback on something you said, Mr. Margaret, because I asked the same question, Mr. Blake. I'm going to ask you to please take the microphone again, because I remember asking this question about El Rodeo when everybody was saying, I started getting emails, they're going to take us offline in August, and I remember asking you whether or not there was any cost benefits to doing that, and the answer that I got was that there was none. And the other answer that I got was that the only benefit would be to save 6 months on the schedule of construction. So basically, there wasn't a reason to be disruptive to that campus. I also believe that once you start to phase people out for whatever purposes of a campus, I believe it's permanent. People move on with their lives. They move on. 3 years, 4 years. Things happen. They move on. It's easier to move on than to go back. I really believe that. That happens with anything, a business, a church, a synagogue. People move on. 4 years is a long time. So did I not receive those questions? Because that's why when the El Rodeo people were here and I said, I don't see why I would want to disrupt a campus. It doesn't make sense for 6 months. It's just not feasible. But I was told there was no cost savings. And so the answer that Mr. Margaret just gave was slightly different.
When you asked it again, I answered it the last time, that when I said there was no appreciable cost savings, we're talking about a concept called a GMAX, and that if we include in our guaranteed maximum price these considerations, there wouldn't be a cost savings appreciably. That's what I meant. However, from the overall standpoint, obviously, if you move the portables off and you do the site work contiguous with the building construction, there's an obvious cost savings. But the question was, would there be, if I were to make a construction decision, my construction decision not relevant, not considering the other issues, it would be better from a construction standpoint, more so than any other campus would be to be able to operate and build without an operating campus on site. Hawthorne, however, it's not an issue. Hawthorne will have to be taken offline in order to do the construction.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I did hear this before once, I think by Totem, when they said that there was a conversation about Hawthorne, and they said that at some point it would have to come offline. And so it's being confirmed here again. But I still don't understand all the details. I appreciate Mrs. Korbatoff sharing some light on that today. But I think that for the community watching, I'm sure if I don't understand it, they don't understand it. So this happened a long time ago, this planning that Mrs. Korbatoff talked about for Hawthorne. I think it would be, people have asked me those questions, so I think it'd be...
It's on our website, just so everyone knows they can pull down the hazmat report from 2011.
But the whole idea of having that school come offline is where the questions have come into
We
play.
have always been told, Isabel,
No, I
at-
understand.
at construction meetings, at board study sessions, that the architects and the
And I'm
builders
not-
told us that it will come off.
And I'm not challenging that. I'm just saying
So-
that for communication purposes, people might not. Still, it seems to be some confusion about that. What I wanted to say is, I think that, when Ms. Korbatoff says, we work for the community and we're here to serve what the community wants us to do. I concur with that. The confusion, though, for me comes with, asking the question, does the community value having neighborhood schools open to some degree of configuration, whether that be a middle school and 3 K-5s? When FFST looked at the looking at reconfiguration, they looked at a model that was 3 K-5s and a dedicated middle school. I think there was value to that because you continue to operate and have a home school within walking distance. Most people get dropped off anyways these days, so I don't think walking is an issue, but I think that the fact that people can make a decision as to where they want to go, there's value. I also think there's value in having K-8s. I understand. I would be remiss not to realize that this district has a traditional long-standing attachment to a K-8 model. But I just think that based on the numbers that where we're at right now, and just looking at, for example, tonight's sample of what it would look like if you took two middle schools and consolidated them, you don't have the optimal results when it comes to scheduling and to offerings. So I don't know how to answer that question, Mrs. Korbatoff. I think you raise a good question, and I know that I said this last week, maybe there's pros and cons to going to a referendum and having the community vote on this, because it is a very difficult issue to tackle. But maybe that's something that this board wants to discuss going forward, because it is a very big issue for all of us to weigh in on. Whether 2 of us feel a certain way or 3 of you feel a certain way, I think that there's truth and value in seeing how the community and what the community wants, so then we can get going and planning accordingly to that mandate. I wonder if there's any interest on the board for that.
Well, with respect to a referendum, if you want to ask the community for a popularity contest, just think that's how we all got here. So that may say everything. I always tell people, I didn't vote for this board, you did. So with all that said, I still think doing absolutely nothing and not giving direction for some of the things I've talked about this evening.
I would give direction, but we need to go into close to find the money.
I understand that, but that's part of giving direction for finding the feasibility to look at this. Mr. Margo asked about the feasibility to do something. I agree. I think we should be looking at everything. I've been talking about that for weeks now. Everything is on the table now. And it's not just about money. Money is a component, because if we keep on doing what we're doing with lower enrollments, the district does come, it's not sustainable over a number of years. We're not going insolvent tomorrow or the next year, but it's not sustainable, and it's not sustainable in enrollment either, and we need to recognize that. If anything, and again, now I'm really pleased because now we spent 3 weeks talking about education, something that probably hasn't happened here in 50 years, which is a good thing that people are paying attention. We may see it a little different. Obviously, there's a board divide between the K-8 model for some of us, mostly the 3 that grew up on it, and 2 others for middle school model. I don't think one's better than the other. It's what fits the community, what fits our facilities. It's what we make of it. That's the difference. That's why all the studies talk both ways. Middle schools have their pros and cons. K-8 models have their pros and cons. It's what we make of it that makes the difference. That's what we should be looking at.
I would tell you that I think if you ask the community, would they pay to keep the K-8 model by having a small parcel tax of $100 per property, which is equitable, they would gladly do it. And even you exempt these senior citizens, I think people would do it in a heartbeat. I think people want to take what they have and make the very most of it. And I don't think there's something wrong necessarily with keeping something that's worked for 100 years. I think it can do better. I would never rest on our laurels, but we have to have the tough discussion. The fall off is at the high school, and it was at the high school before construction. That is the fall off. And things just came up a few weeks ago that the board is tackling now, which speaks volumes to why people are not going to our high school. And I don't want to get into it up here, but the board knows what I'm talking about. And it's not a secret, it's just I don't want to embarrass certain people. But there are decisions made that benefit adults and not children. And this is why people vote with their feet and they leave. So I think we can talk about everything but the problem. And the problem is the high school. And if the high school was as stellar as it was when I went there and Mr. Margot and when Mr. Spitz was a board member, and he was a board member when I was a junior, he was there. He was there when I was actually a freshman and then a sophomore. Then guess what? We wouldn't be having a fall off in middle school. I mean, we would be looking for more classrooms for these kids everywhere. But people are voting with their feet. Imagine people are paying the kind of money they're paying to live here, and they're spending $30,000 to $50,000 per kid per year to go to private school, and to go not to their neighborhood school a couple blocks away, but to drive with traffic in each direction. Don't you think we need to examine that? Yes. So, you know, to Howard's cousin, I am talking about your kids, and it kills me. Andy. I am talking about your kids because I got no skin in this game anymore.
But you do, because you're a board member.
I'm a board member and I care deeply about your kids. I really, really do. I don't, you know, I care. But I have to tell you that we have a lot of improvements that need to be made at the high school. And we need to call into judgment, what do we do with our resources? How do we deploy them? What choices are we making to benefit education and the conducive environment to educate our children? How are we supporting teachers? How are we mentoring teachers? How are we mentoring teachers who are marginal to get better? How are we enriching the experience for teachers and for students? These are all such important questions. But if you look at the results, and before we started construction, people were leaving. I run into them, you all run into them. The fall off is at 7th grade because they don't want to go to the high school. And that's the sad state of affairs. So I say if you want to fix the problem in middle school, you better fix the high school. So you want to give direction? I'm happy to give that direction. Yeah, I think we should do public comment. I apologize. I promised you public comment. I don't have any speaker cards, so. And Mrs. Hacker suggested a great thing, a break for 5 minutes. And then please, if you like, give Pam Kraushar your speaker cards and I'll call you up. Thank you.
We had our first coffee yesterday. Right. We're third cousins through Lisa Corbin. No, we're through my dad. Yeah. I just get it. Right. So. This is what happens. Parents leave and leave. Now they're going to leave I get that. But
And maybe LaTanya, when we were going over numbers about 2 board meetings ago about
So are you guys not going to vote to do anything next year? What's going on now? I've been sitting here. Are you just as confused as I am?
Yeah.
Like, they've got to do something. I know.
No, it wasn't. It was supposed to. It was 1 million something.
We were told for many years.
It was by consolidating 4 middle schools
Outside buildings
like full level. One of those 4 building campuses that were off of 4 algebras, and then we pulled down to 3. That was a cost. 40 different.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we're just kind of, we're got told to build a house.
Yeah.
10 years of construction and processing.
The progress is big. Traffic. That is the most traffic chef. And as soon as one dispossesses himself of that side across the way, someone gets right to build that. Just 5 years ago, the biggest construction traffic problem that will then only get worse because that was built there. That's the one building I'm always about. You're going to build something, you get rid of it, which is just
Well, yeah, and then what?
Like, but kids and parents have jobs to go to, and they drop their kids off, and they work on the way off, and they drop off at 7:30, right? Dad gets there early, Donnie gets there early. Donnie's like, I'm not near capacity.
Without paying all the and not the kindergarten, so you still have a 5-space possibility. You don't have the library, they're not calling the important peer class.
We've been asked for all of our K-5s, and they gave us all the middle school. But that was a joke. Because they don't have any middle school programs.
So there would be a very smallest community.
Here's what I say. The topic that we had was they agree that no one's going to move right now, which I think they're not going to move our kids for $300 a head, right?
I'm not even counting the current kindergarten customers, because we could always leave them dormant until we were to switch the pirates, or you can close off the spaces and allow them storage and run a robotics program on it, because they're huge rooms.
Probably want to add one service going to the gym, which would take about 4
The kids could be there while, because that's an accessible building from all 4 sides. There's nothing blocking them. Yeah. So I mean, that's what we're looking at through this whole process is obviously programmatically. You know, roughly understanding is all
Yeah, it's not.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Sharon, is to tell Karina yes?
Thank you. Just for hi. Thank you so much.
Tell Karina yes.
I mean, for themselves, but almost people, right? Some of them don't care. Yes, I will. Yeah, no, tomorrow we're going to try to switch to my platform. Tomorrow we're going to try to switch to my platform. For me, that's a lifetime ago.
See the podium? Oh yeah, walk the front. See the podium. Oh, there's the T. I see the camera. Yeah, I'll walk the front.
Folks, we're going to sit down in 60 seconds.
We're going to start public comment. We're
starting public comment.
We're going to start calling 3 people up.
Woody Clark, can you guys just get ready? Andrew Sipes? Yeah, you're number 2, Andrew.
I thought what I was going to say.
Sharona Zanotti? Okay, I'm just calling out your names because it just makes it a little faster. Okay, folks? So Woody Clark, Dr. Woodrow Clark, Andrew Sipes, Sharona Zanotti, and then Tina Weiner. We don't have that many today.
I just want to say there's a very compelling meeting tonight, and I'm here in part to say that I think it's important as to what the future will be in terms of board members or whatever. And I was talking at the break with your president of student body, and I said, I think you should run for the school board next year, you know. But he's going up to Stanford first, so after that. But I think he's great. And I just
That's not an excuse.
I wasn't going to say I went to Cal, but Stanford's okay. The point is that I think that everybody's coming to the same conclusion. No decisions now. You have to have a plan. You've got to look into this more. And I think you also have to look at what the definition is of reconfiguration. It may just not be the middle school or the elementary. Let's look at the high school. Let's look at other options and possibilities. But the fact of the matter is, let's move on. I think everybody's in agreement that there has to be some change. Thank you.
Just to introduce myself, my name is Sharona. I have 3 children in the school district, from kindergartner, 6th grader, and one that just went to high school. And I myself went to Hawthorne as an alumni, and we moved, back then, going to school in Beverly Hills was a privilege. And we moved there for these reasons, for the K through 8. However, I think the time has come that, my children are not getting the education that we received. And especially now that he's in high school. Okay, sorry, I'm a little. My son graduated with honors in Aristonians. He went to Beverly with dreams of he's going to go to college, going to go to university, went on the football team. Guess what? The year is almost over. He's completely discouraged. He doesn't want to go to he just came back to me last week and said, Mom, I think I'm going to go to SMC along with most of these kids. Because he wasn't prepared. He was not prepared for high school. And if the time has come for change, and if it's going to be better for our students, you know what? We have to accept it. I like the K through 8 model, but I see from the things that my children show me, the Snapchats, the things that go on in the classrooms, their quality of teachers is not the same. So I'm just a firm believer we have to do what's right for our children. I'm not into any of this politics. This is probably the first time I've been to one of these board meetings because I felt so strong about it. Just as a simple parent, a simple alumni, someone that has 3 children and has another 12 years to go in this district, we have to do what's right for our children. And really, it has to be organized. My son graduated from the front lawn of Hawthorne. My daughter got her honors and Aristonian award in a cafeteria. This is not Beverly Hills standards. We're living here in one of the best cities in the world, and this is what's happening to our children. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Howard's cousin. I'm Andy Sipes. So thank you for doing this today. It really has been a remarkable 3 Tuesdays or so of debate. I never thought I'd spend so much time, but it's been fascinating. I'm going to ramble just a little bit and talk to each of the board members, and I really do appreciate the conversation. There's no question in my mind that your hearts are in this. There's none. It's very clear that you care, and that's great to see. You're arguing because you care. No one here do I say, he doesn't care, she doesn't care, she's leaving, right? Or she's not leaving, he's leaving, whatever. I would say, Mr. Spitz, I knew your son. I went to Hawthorne with your son. I remember your old car. And it was a long time ago. And I was at Hawthorne for a number of years. I went to high school for a year, and I left. This was way back then in the good old days, right? And I know my family. We have a 9-year-old and a 3-year-old. There certainly has been a lot of discussion already that we will not put our kids through the high school here. And that's just an honest, even from us. We were in private school. Oh, sorry, my 9-year-old was in private school. We moved him here because we want to be part of this community. We want these schools to be great. I actually walk my son to school every single day unless it's pouring. I love that. He loves it. I love being close to school. My wife is incredibly involved in this school. It's a great feeling that we don't get at private school. I have zero interest in going back to private school. Zero interest in paying $50,000 a year and everything else. And my son Donnie gets special ed stuff, and it's fabulous. We pay a fortune for that at in private school. And in fact, we have friends that do pay a fortune. We were just talking today. My son got a psychological evaluation. He's totally fine, by the way. But just to see about his learning, the psychiatrist or whatever he is, psychologist, whatever, at Hawthorne did blew me away. I thought the guy was going to give us this piece of direct report. Really. He's probably
20 years old. He did a phenomenal job. It was free. We get help with his handwriting, whatever it happens to be. For years, it is free. And they care. They care. And they've changed his life, period. Why would I want to leave this district? I never want to leave. But I do think there's an election coming. I do. And I think, Mr. It's a little unfair to say, well, it's just going to be a popularity contest and you'll get someone who isn't competent. That's the electoral process. We will see who gets elected. And I think that this is a community issue, as some of you have said, that transcends just school operations, that this community, someone will see me time, right? That this community should be involved in. And in fact, at the mayor's walk yesterday, day before, whenever that was, the mayor said that to Noah, said, this is what elections are for, Noah. Now, she's not the ultimate authority, but it's true. And we met, both of us met a Beverly Hills resident, probably late 40s, no kids in school, said, I didn't know about any of this. I didn't know about school potentially closing. I didn't know about consolidation. This is Beverly Hills. How is this happening? The community will care. And whether it becomes a parcel tax or, I said, a tax on real estate transactions that's even bigger, whatever it is that's equitable, so or elderly are not hurt, et cetera, that's a great idea. And there are other great ideas a board you will have. This board and the next board. I mean, some of us looked at those salaries for teachers and were dumbfounded. Not that we haven't looked in the paper and seen everyone's salary, we kind of know. But when you're budgeting $135,000 a year, approximately, for a coding instructor, I build internet companies. I'll find you someone for 40. Right? Now, I know it's a little flip. I'm not an idiot, right? I know there's much more to it than that. But there are costs associated. When I look at this as just a bad business guy, because I'm not the best, I go, oh my goodness. I mean, how do you even run this thing? This thing will sink. When I was out in the hallway, I saw a sign that said, the Hubble space thing is 12 tons heavy. I said, my God, they got a 12-ton thing out into space. If they could do that, we can fix this problem. So what am I advocating? First, Hawthorne can't be the victim. I care about every single school, Horace Mann, Beverly Vista, El Rodeo, the high school, Hawthorne, period. I care about every single one. I wouldn't make anyone the victim. But I hear that from some of this. I do. That El Rodeo suffered, BV suffered, blah, blah, blah. No Hawthorne, but we suffer. We have a very old building. We don't have an auditorium, et cetera. But we care just like they care, right? So I know I'm going over my time. I'm going to try to keep this a little shorter. There is a group here that is so passionate about making this right. I thought coming in here, this was what was going to happen. That you guys were going to meet, hear comments, and say, 1, we've already told you we're not closing a school this year. We're not. 2, we are not moving your kids for $300 a head. And I think we know we're not doing that, right? $300 a head, savings. How many people here knew that Hawthorne Middle School today was awarded the Best Jedi Warrior Program? What is it called? School to Watch, right? Who knew that 2 weeks ago? Did any of you know that 2 weeks ago? Yes. So 2 weeks ago, and I'll tell you, this is the problem sometimes the community has. That is so cynical to me. How would you disperse those kids when you knew that? So the exercise was cynical. And we want to love you guys and work together. But it was cynical. And it hurts us, and it builds up that wall of distrust. Period. Right? So, one last thing, and then I'll finish. Noah, you can't say, I mean, you can say, and I mean this as a friend. I enjoyed talking to you. You're going to, I think all of you can contribute, really. But you can't say, let's just figure out what school we're closing fast and tell the community and move on, because there has been no rational study of all the uses of all the schools and how that would happen and the impact. If anything, the comment could be, we know we need to fix the system financially and just get on the same page. I mean, we know, you kind of conceded a little bit at the end. We know the fix needs to happen. We know it. We get it. We hear it here. We know, right? It's how it is done. I said change is hard, but change management is harder. We need to get to change management. How does that start? All these great people, you make them feel better. You, as parents, you say, we're not closing the school, we're not moving anyone, we're not making a hasty decision, there's an election in November, we understand this, we're going to work as a board through that time period, we will do the best we can, we will try to come up with a plan, but we know that the new board members coming in November deserve a voice as well, and we are not going to lock them into anything. We might give them great advice, we might have all the papers there, but they're going to be able to contribute as well. So community, go on your way, be great parents, give to your schools, do the things that you want to do. Don't be hindered by us feeling like our school might not be there. Why would I give to them? And we will work together and make this work out. And that I implore you to do because we all need it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen, Carmona, Shelley, Azizi, and Rusty Banagan. I hope I'm saying those right.
To set this to short. Hi, I'm going to be super brief because, like last time, everything I wrote is no longer relevant. Just while there have been many discussions about reconfiguration in the past, the only serious conversations about specifics have opened up this year. That doesn't, I think it's a little hasty to rush to a decision when all of this has just, in a realistic way, been put on the table. Whereas, I'm sorry, farther away. Every school is different, as you know, and the area in which you buy or rent your home may or may not be the school that's best for your student. They all have different cultures, different personalities, and they organize themselves differently. As a member of the, never mind, that doesn't apply anymore. If the board feels, or any members of the board feel, that it's important that people go back to the schools nearest to where they reside, that needs to be an across-the-board ruling. It can't just be a Hawthorne ruling. If you're going to deport or redistribute, it needs to be equitable. I just wanted to point that out. And if there's, I understand, I think it's definitely too early to make any decisions about anything, but I also hear people and friends who go to other schools who say, but we need something right now. And the only solution that I can come up with that meets both needs is potentially give a little something to a school that has lower enrollment. Just, you brought up Horace Mann, Mr. Goldstein. Maybe there are some community members who left because of the construction who do want to go back, and it's worth asking. But because they've been so diluted for a while, maybe they have a little less stuff. Maybe in order to help them and to entice people to go back, I know it's not a money saver, and my husband would say I'm great at spending it, give them a little more stuff in order to come back. Maybe do a little pilot, say we're going to do a trial. We're going to give more stuff to this one location. We're going to give 2 languages, maybe a team, maybe something, just to make it a better environment in the short term. And hopefully people will want to transfer there willingly. And then hopefully things will roll out as they roll out. But I think that solves leaving the people who want to stay where they are in place, giving something to the people who feel underserviced, and also giving everybody more time to figure out what the real long-term solutions are. Thank you.
I had a question. I was wondering when we left last week, Lisa, what some of your final comments were. I'm not doing anything right now. I want you guys to run the numbers and come back to me. What I understood that you guys were going to talk about today, either Hawthorne or another school stays open or it doesn't.
You're Rusty, right?
Yes.
Okay, Rusty. I called up Mr. Blake because I had questions. I think for me, it is eminently clear that we do not have the physical space to run comfortable schools as 3 K-8s right now, meaning comfortable that kids have room and space for programming, for movement, in the cafeteria, in the playgrounds, whatnot. drop-off, pickup, all the logistical issues. I don't even have traffic studies for 3K8s. So for me, the subject is done and closed. It's a community discussion at the next election perhaps, or in some other, or another board configuration. I only speak for myself, I am not doing anything right now because there is no physical space in which to do it.
Right, and I absolutely agree with you, and I think most people would. My question is, what's the question at hand for you guys right now that you're going to vote on? What's the question?
The discussion as listed, we had it. We can take a vote or give direction. We'll call the question. There may be multiple questions. We'll see where the chips fall. And if 3 or more of us give direction for a list of items that are in my email and on Mr. Goldstein's screen, then we'll come back with more information on that. But I can
Okay.
only speak as one board member.
So tonight, we won't know if Hawthorne is.
No, you'll know. We're
Oh,
going to
okay.
call the question, I believe.
So that's, what's the?
It says discussion, if I'm not mistaken.
Point of order, Ms. Gorbachev. I thought that.
Discussion and approval of reconfiguration plan.
I thought, Mrs. Gorbachev, I thought that
It's a direction item.
the
Well,
discussion item pertained completely to tonight's presentation, was it not? That's what my
Well,
understanding
I
was.
mean, the
That's what I
presentation says 3 K8s and 1 K5, or the other recommendation was a dedicated middle school a year from now, or close a school a year from now completely, or make 3 K8s and 1 K5 a year from now. So I think there are 3 options if I'm missing one. Did I miss one?
But my question is, so.
I think we're going to give direction
Right.
on which, if any, we're going to do. I think we're going to do that right now.
I thought the question was, is Hawthorne going to stay open or is it not going to stay open? That's the question, that's a big
Yeah,
question.
and I'm going to work it out with the
Okay.
board how we answer these questions.
Okay, that's a question that we'd like
I agree.
answered.
You need it answered.
Thank you.
To formulate, oh, one more? I don't have it, but okay.
Tina.
Oh, Tina, I'm sorry, yeah, yes, you're called up and someone ceded you time?
No, I just, Tina's my time. You go. Thank you.
Good evening. I am Tina Wiener, parent at Horace Mann and at the high school. And at first, I'm just going to speak for myself and say that I am still a big fan of the middle school, and I am also a big fan of the high school. So with all that's been said, I think we're really doing well. So, but I am reading this statement on behalf of at least a dozen Horace Mann families who have been following the reconfiguration process from the beginning. We've heard strong community sentiment from Hawthorne, Beverly Vista, and El Rodeo, and now we'd like to express the sentiment that many families feel at Horace Mann. And with all due respect to some of the comments we've heard this evening, I do think that this was a great time to have this discussion. Based on the studies, testimony, and discussion over the last 2 weeks, the glaring inequities at Horace Mann have now been exposed. Although it has been researched and shown by our FFST that there is a systemic inequality across the district in program offerings, Horace Mann is in a particularly bad situation because of the low enrollment at our middle school. This has been an ongoing problem for at least 6 years, and up until this point, the response from the district has been to continue cutting staff based slowly on enrollment numbers. It seems that little regard has been given to what it has done to our middle school programming and our school morale. If there is no possibility of implementing a plan for the 2018-19 school year, which would boost enrollment by blending schools or creating the dedicated middle school, then we implore you to make other changes that will improve the situation at our school and to do it quickly. The district has made an $83 million investment in our campus, and a number of committed, amazing Horace Mann families have patiently, and some not so patiently, hung in there for the day when the buildings on the campus would be finished. Let's finish the job completely and make Horace Mann into the beacon school that our district and families deserve. We at Horace Mann are ready and willing to sit down with Dr. Breggy and his cabinet, utilizing the results from the pioneering and I think very brave survey that was recently distributed to parents, and help to put in place a true 21st century education to match our newly constructed and remodeled buildings. We want the enhanced programming that Mr. Seaman discussed. We beg you to give us a second AP to share the workload for the moderate to severe prime program that is housed at Horace Mann. To truly finish the job the district started with construction at Horace Mann, we feel strongly that our new state-of-the-art campus must showcase high-quality, rigorous, and robust programming that underscores 21st century learning. This is what will inspire and motivate families to attend Horace Mann by their own choice. We urge you to use Horace Mann, as Ellen mentioned, as a pilot for the district to showcase everything we want to be as a lighthouse district. We can continue to replicate this model as each school finishes construction. We have a very large rising sixth grade class at Horace Mann this year, larger than we've seen, I think, in the last 7 years. So we feel like we're in a great position to enact these positive changes immediately, and it's a perfect opportunity for the district to make this investment. Please focus your attention and resources at Horace Mann immediately so that we can get a plan of action put into place for the 2018-19 school year. We would like to, so we want to say make Horace Mann a school to watch for the next school year. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your indulgence. I hadn't turned this in because by the end of the last discussion before the break, I thought it wouldn't be necessary. But after listening to the last answer, I realized that I do still want to say my piece. So again, my name is Michala Mir-Salkin. And first of all, I want to thank all of you for last week. You listened to us, you deliberated openly so we could follow your discussion, and you even let us express our concerns, and you clarified issues for us in a way that was kind of unorthodox and very forthright. And I know that I personally left last week's meeting with a much better appreciation for all of your commitment to our schools and our children. As you know, families with children are drawn to Beverly Hills for our famous school district. A strong district is essential because weak schools discourage families from living here. Without families living normal lives, Beverly Hills would become a tourist destination of absentee owners and short-term renters. Empty houses mean less local spending and more crime, while renters who are not part of the community do things like drag racing on Walden Drive and nearly killing one of my neighbors. So this board's choices have serious ramifications for our entire city. The information you have and that you have presented to us is extremely complicated, and it seems to be open to different interpretations. Do we have the reserves to hold on while the board decides what to do, or are we about to bleed out to death? Do we want to entice students back from private schools, or does basic aid mean that we don't want to add more students to the pot? And there are many different options for how to reorganize Beverly Hills USD. You're talking about the 3K through 8 option, the 3K through 8 and 1 through 5 option, the middle school and high school option, the K through 6, 7 through 12 option. This all needs to be studied, and the best choice needs to be determined. Then you must figure out the transition process that will get us there in the most efficient and least disruptive manner. And then you must convince the community that this really is the best choice for our families. And that's a lot of work. That is not doing nothing. So please, I ask you, take the time to formulate a thoughtful, viable plan for Beverly Hills USD's future. Bring all of us along with you as you do it. Use 2018-19 wisely so that you will be known as the visionary board that brought our school district and our city safely into the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think public comment is closed. I think I have everyone's cards. So I think we have to discuss our options or how we're going to go about giving direction. Jonathan?
Yeah. I think that before we take any action tonight, I think we need to definitively know exactly if any of the options on the table are even viable. I do think that this board should vote on something in the coming weeks. I think we need to give some indication of where we are and allow staff and parents an idea of what's coming forward. But I would say for the next couple of weeks or as soon as it's possible, we need a definitive answer from staff. Is a 3K8 viable if it's something we would even want to do? Is a dedicated middle school viable if it's something we want to do? How long can we afford to remain a 4K8 school from a financial perspective? Is it something that we would be able to wait years, or is it something that's pressing and we need to change immediately? And I think definitely the most significant thing that we need to do is convene groups similar to the Future Focus Schools team to better look at all the options on the table. I think they need to take a look at precise, line-by-line implementations of each of the options on the table. How would we implement a dedicated middle school? How would we implement a 7-12? How would we implement 3K8? Exactly what is it going to do? And they can look at it further and we can vote on those options. I think that at this point we have a lot of general ideas about which models are best. I know what I think is best, but I think the community and board would benefit from better looking at that information and having definitive answers before they go out on a limb and making their best guesses about what we may genuinely believe is correct, but we don't know for a fact. That's what I would say for direction.
I agree with everything that Jonathan said. Before we can really vote on anything, we ought to know, will the budget be viable? Will it be viable, budget-wise? So in my mind, it's hard for me to imagine our taking any position yet on anything.
I agree with Mr. Ortel and Mr. Spitz, and specifically, I think as it relates to the needs at Horace Mann, we need to. I really need to understand what's going on with our finances. So I'm looking forward to attending Thursday's meeting, and as I said, I hope that they will come back and communicate with the community and this board as to what they have found to be the financial position of the district. Once I understand that information and the critical timeline of how quick or how long we have to assess some of these decisions that need to be made, I would feel much more comfortable saying, here's where we're at, and here's the timeline, and here's what we can do for Horace Mann. And then maybe take a different, make more decision, make a comprehensive decision here on this board as to what options exist for us. If we don't have the money, we have to come back to the table and think about, okay, what are our clear options here? And I don't think I have that information at my disposition right now.
Okay, well, I'll repeat what I've said the last couple of weeks. Again, accountability is crucial. Nothing's going to work unless we enhance our accountability across our sites. And I implore my colleagues to hire a director of primary education and also hire a director of secondary education. We all know what that means for this district. We need to improve the educational environments. These are things we can do immediately. Hire full-time counselors at each of the K-8 sites. Hire a library media tech, and to form that Lighthouse Committee to further explore long-range district configuration options. And also seriously look at the feasibility of restoring the school resource officers at all sites. Given what's been happening, and it's not a reaction to the last 14 shootings this year, or all the shootings last year, or the shootings the year before. There's so much more school resource officers used to provide for those parents that remember them here in the district. They do deal with the DARE program, bullying, harassment issues. Shootings are very rare. When they happen, they're horrible and they're tragic, and we would never want to see that here. But there's so many other things that an SRO brings to our sites that I think is so important. I think that should be job one as well. And Ms. Korbatoff, I'll let you bring up the parcel tax since you brought it up, but Mr. Margot gets to go first before me. So I hope my colleagues will, at a minimum, agree to do that. That will solve accountability, that will solve the enrollment to be looked at, and it will deal with some resources that I think have been missing from this district for probably 25 years, at least for the last 15.
I would just caution you, Mr. Goldstein, that positions are only effective if they're filled by effective people. Okay? So it's great to call for those things, and I will support looking into those, but you have to get the right people. Now, we are sitting here, whatever we're looking at, structural deficit, operating deficit, whatever it is, we have a deficit. We have been told time and time again that eventually, at some point, we're going to run out of our reserves. Okay? When that happens, I don't know. And I can't even tell you anymore because it seems like I'm told something and then it's not really the truth. Or it's not, it changes. I should thank you. Sorry. I have nothing against your bottle. But I love all the answers to everything Mr. Attal asked, everything you are inquiring about. But like, I guess Ms. Korbatoff will get to the parcel tax. I implore that you're going to have to pay for it, and you're going to have to find a way to structurally set this district up in the future so you don't have to worry about paying for things. This is one of the impetuses of this discussion. The FFST, although at the beginning it was spawned on by budget deficit, and then it was moved toward an educational discussion and a delivery discussion, whatever it is, we still have deficiencies in both those areas, right? Delivery of education and finances. So I understand everybody's individual reasons why they're not acting tonight, but we do need to take action as a board. We can't, and even if it's that going out for a parcel tax as soon as possible to see if the community is going to continue to support 4K8s, that's fine, that's action, and I'm okay with that. That's something, but we need to do something.
Okay, so the second to last lady spoke, Rusty, correct? Yes. And she had a really simple request. She'd like to know if certain things are going to get answered. As one board member, I'm going to try to answer you. I'm not moving, I'm not voting personally, you know, whether the question, we have to call the question, maybe we don't, to disrupt Hawthorne. I'm not closing it. That's my one vote. I don't want to move anyone. We don't have anywhere to go. We have no room. We have to finish construction El Rodeo. We have to figure out, are we bringing a bond? What do we do with Hawthorne if we bring a bond? What do we tell the community Hawthorne will look like and function at? Those are critical questions. We have to open up the rest of Horace Mann. We need to give them some equity. We need to do what Mrs. Weiner said. She's right. We need accountability. We need transparency. We need all these things. But I, right now, am one vote not to move kids out of Hawthorne and not to close it.
Why don't you ask the rest of us?
So I would like to ask the rest of you to call the question. Who would like to phrase the question? Want me to phrase it?
It's an interesting question.
Yes. So does anyone?
I don't think any of us are interested in doing that.
We don't need to vote on it.
Okay, so we're not. So there's your answer. Nobody is. Well, why not go on the record?
Technically, it's not an agendized item,
Well,
so it would
that's
be
true, but it
direction.
was- it
That's why I
was
said
one
you
of
could
the-
poll the board and get all our opinions, but we
But
technically.
it was one of the options.
No, I
Yeah,
understand
that's
that. Here's the
correct.
issue, though. This was not posted to the agenda in advance, so it cannot be technically voted on by the board. Okay, that'd be a violation of the Brown Act. So we can not vote on it and not take action, and then therefore action is taken by taking no action.
Well, I
But
would
if you want to
like-
ask each board member,
Well,
are
I'd
we
like
going to
the
shift any
board-
kids
I would
around in
like the
2018?
board-
Let me ask this,
Yeah.
okay? Colleagues, does anybody want to move any students in fall of 2018?
No.
No.
No, 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 no. Okay. Can you clap? Absolutely. I'll bow.
Okay, so the second item is, I concur with everything Mr. Goldstein offered up. I'd like to add that I would like for the board and the superintendent and the leadership at Horace Mann to look at what we can do right now in August to give them what they're missing, what's been taken away because of low enrollment. I don't think that that's equity that we don't.
So I think that Mrs. Weiner asked for a and you can tell me, Mrs. Wiener, if if I'm misquoting you. She asked for an interface with Dr. Breggy and his staff to maybe talk about these issues with the horseman community that are obviously, prevailing. And so I think that would be a good that would be good for
I'd
you
like
to
know, would
have,
the
and
board
then
like to give direction to
and
make
then
sure
we can
that
find
that
out,
happens,
and maybe you can
and
go, Mrs. Carter.
what they need. Well, maybe one or two board members can go and be at least listen in on the discussion. What was taken away? What can be restored to give them
The
a
needs,
fuller
yeah.
experience? So, would the board like to offer that?
Yeah, we can give direction to staff to look into that immediately.
Okay, is there anyone dissenting from that direction? Okay, so that's unanimous. The third thing is, I think whether you're going to keep the K-8 model or you're going to go to a dedicated middle school, it is eminently clear that we are always, at times, not always, but there are many times in the year or in the last years I've been here, we're scrambling for money. And we do reactionary cuts, which we have got to stop doing. I would like to ask the board is when we discuss, and just for everyone's knowledge, we have to decide if we're going for a June bond by March 9th. So let's work backwards on timeline. Just for the clarity out there, you have an opportunity to go for a June bond and a November bond on even years. Should you not prevail on those two, you wait 2 more years. So it's really very important for the board to understand and to decide, do they want to go forward with a bond to finish El Rodeo, finish the high school, and completely do Hawthorne, whatever it's going to be, a middle school or a K-8. Because if we don't have this bond election in June or November, you'll wait another 2 years, more time, and I don't know, and then much more money. When Measure Y failed by 346 votes, had 64.3%, and we needed 66.667. We put out literature that, and we were accurate, that it was 12 to 15% in cost escalations and inflation. It is now 20%. So what would buy you with 400 million, now you need 480 million. That's what 20% is. It's a lot because everyone's building and there's a scarcity of people and material. So the longer we wait, the more we spend to get less, or the much more we spend to get the same we would have gotten for less. So this is a really serious discussion the board needs to have, and we need to make a decision by March 9th. You have to have 2 scheduled board meetings in which to have a discussion and then a vote. So working backwards, I would ask Ms. Kirk-Carter, since you're the one who has been working with me and council and Keegan, if there's direction to at least investigate a small parcel tax, whether it's a nominal amount of $100 per property, excluding senior citizens that believe that's commercial and residential, am I right?
Yes.
Then we would have enough money to always maintain the highest quality at every school site, whether it's 3 K-5s and 1 middle school or 4 K-8s, or 3 K-8s, whatever the demographics are and the population is. Would the board like to at least explore a small parcel tax?
I would say so.
And I mean small. I don't mean big. I mean small.
Well, it has to be effective. It has to
Right.
be
I think that I was told about $90 to $120 would do the trick. I could be wrong. But when you look at it, goes on every single piece of property, whether it's a skyrise or a house. So there's some inequity there, but at least if you exclude senior citizens, you may have a good shot at passing it.
My concern about it is this. It's the easiest thing in the world to say that in the K-8 model, we're gonna clean it up. We're gonna fix up our middle schools. I don't think that we can do the job with the low enrollment we have in middle school. And therefore, my feeling is that what we would accomplish if we were able to pass a parcel tax would be to have the money to continue to fund the wrong things that we're doing. And ultimately, we will not be improving substantially or what we should, the level we should, the educations of our middle schoolers. All we would do, if we did pass a parcel tax, would just fund the status quo. I'm concerned about that.
So, Mr. Spitz, the perfect example is Horace Mann. They have a lower enrollment. If we had more money to direct their way, they'd have more instruction, more classes, more electives. Even if the class sizes were small, they would still be able to have more staffing. We could put more electives, more choices. We could run more honors classes because we would have money for staffing. So I understand that some of this is low enrollment, but the reason we don't have all the staffing commensurate is because we have this cutoff. So one mother came up to me and she said her son couldn't take an honors class because he was 1 over the amount. Well, there might be more than one. There could be 7. But if we had the money, we would have 2 honors classes of 12 kids each, or 14, or 18, whatever the number, probably 8.
If you get enough money,
Yeah.
you can have classes with no more than 3 kids in each class.
Well, I think that would
maybe
not
we should
be-
have one-on-one, a teacher with a class. If you get enough money, you can afford it. So, please.
Mr. Spitz,
I
that's,
may
you know, making such
excuse
an
me,
outrageous example is not really helpful.
well, I may be the only one on this board that is cautioning. But if you're going to get additional funds from a parcel tax, I think you need to know what you're spending it on. And if you're spending it on multiple middle schools, I don't think it's a smart thing to do. Now, that's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. That's fine. But that's my opinion.
That's fine. Mrs. Hacker, we want to get some direction if we should pursue a parcel tax.
I think the direction should be that we get some information, because I want to make sure that's, are you sure $100 was it? I mean, did you?
I saw
Normally
one-
300. I saw that.
I just looked up a lot of the LA County
Yeah.
and Southern California parcel taxes. They actually range anywhere from $65 to $300. It
Right,
just
so I've
depends
seen
on-
them 90 to
And it depends on the
120.
duration, because a lot of them have
Exactly.
durations anywhere
So-
from 3 to 9 to
So
15
just to
years.
respond a little bit to, we have this audit, this academic audit that is going to be completing, should we be completing it soon, or when is that going to conclude?
February 27th, the board meeting, they'll be doing the presentation to all of us for the first time.
Okay. So I think that when the academic audit is prepared and we start to hear where we can make improvements and what our strengths are, I think it'll be a good opportunity for us to really discuss where we want to have some more dollars behind some of those areas of weakness so that we can make improvements. So I don't see why we can't have a discussion about how a parcel tax can benefit our educational system, and where those dollars would back up have some backing behind some of the areas of improvement that are needed for our district. I think that's a good thing to do. So.
Okay, thank you. And just as a reminder, the board has agreed that next close we'll talk about some cuts to the budget to help.
Yes, the cabinet will get together and talk about.
You'll talk about personnel. You won't talk about cuts. 'Cause
Right.
Right, personnel, but.
Budget is open, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
I just want to make be clear, you want me to have Keegan, who is at the ready to come to our February 13th board meeting, present on parcel tax and GO
Yeah,
bond?
I think that we have interest.
Or just parcel tax?
No, both, because March 9th is the cutoff.
Right, and they'll just do a
to
presentation
green
for
light,
us.
Right, to
Okay.
green light.
Well, shouldn't we
bond.
ask Mr. Blake what he thinks about whether or not we're even ready for a June ballot for a bond? Because I know that you have some direction from DSA as to when anything can really start to happen.
Yeah.
Well, but if you don't pass a June bond, you only have November.
Wait, Ms.
so-
Gorbachev, 1 second. We're talking about a parcel tax in relationship to K-8 and reconfiguration and all that, and that's apropos for the discussion that's posted. The bond, you as the president can put that on the agenda and bring it to us. We don't need to discuss it in
Okay,
this meeting.
so-
It's not agendized.
Right, thank you, Mr. Blake. All right, so Latanya.
And next time I'm getting you a chair back there.
February 13th, because we should put the bond on the agenda because we only have a few meetings before March 9th.
I could ask.
And they have to be 2 consecutive meetings,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, but they don't have to be regularly scheduled, so we could call a special.
Exactly, I understand.
And I understand the bond needs to be passed by March 9th. Is there a deadline for the
No,
parcel?
Which I think needs to be given
Direction needs to be,
direction.
I guess
actually a
the
vote.
vote is in June. I understand that we
Right.
need to give the direction to put it on the ballot in June
Right.
by March 9th. Is it similar with the parcel tax? Is there
I
that
don't
same
know, that's what we're
urgency?
going to find out. I think so, right?
I think that it is.
That's what we would like for them to come.
Right,
and
so you
explain to
know, you
us.
could
Okay.
put a bond in June and a parcel tax in November. Heaven forbid you don't pass the bond in June, you can try for it in
Yeah.
November. So, I mean, you can stagger these and have a broader discussion with the community to address Mr. Spitz's concerns that more money just means we're throwing money at
Status quo.
Yeah.
it's status quo. And I appreciate his concerns, so I think, you know, it gives us some time to have that discussion.
Okay. Mr. Goldstein, your feeling on the parcel tax, because we need to have 3 to give direction.
All right, so what you're witnessing here, and it's been said many a times, governance is like sausage making. It's not pretty when you're watching it or seeing how it's made, but as long as in the end it comes out and tastes good and everybody seems to enjoy it, you've succeeded. So that's what's going on. Well, no, it's more than a yes or no. No, well, thank you. I have the floor. Thank you. The FFSD has identified a number of deficiencies in our K-8s. And within that, it's accountability, and I've talked ad nauseum because people want to get on with their lives apparently. Enrollment, which money's not going to solve, and resources, which a parcel tax will. So of course I'm in favor of a parcel tax because it solves the third item that the FSD and our superintendent and staff has identified. So it's very important, so I'm in favor of it. Was that quick enough? Yes. You're welcome.
Okay. So so let's do some takeaways. It's better
Yes,
like
I
that.
support looking into a parcel tax too. Thanks for asking.
Good. So that's the takeaway. So now it's unanimous, and I think Mr. Spitz is going to have a wait and see, but the 4 of us are giving direction. As to the other items that Mr. Goldstein mentioned, obviously, do we concur that we would like to look at a director of primary education, director of secondary, full-time counselors at the K-8s, library media teachers and techs, they're probably interchangeable, and looking at security at all 5 campuses. All of this would hopefully start in August, and for this to happen, we would have to talk about certain issues with our budget. I want to say something that, you know, it's easy, I think, to pile on about the budget, and yeah, budgets are layered and complex, and I'm not a finance person. But I understand the budget enough that I know that when I was board president, and I saw
You still are.
Still are, when I was last time, I didn't deficit spend. I haven't seen deficit spending since 2010. If we deficit spent this year, it's news to me, maybe we did, but I don't recall any deficit spending up until last year. Maybe this year's in question. We built our reserves, we've been paying down pension obligations, we have phenomenal bond rating. So, you know, I know we're not perfect, but we're definitely not insolvent, and I appreciate Mr. Spitz's concerns, and I take them seriously. But I'd like to say that I do understand the budget enough, so when people say they don't get it, I'm kind of confused by that. I've seen a lot of data, and I get it. It just may not be always what other people want to get, but I get it. So having said that, I think we gave direction. Do we want to reiterate that we're not moving any kids in 18-19 from any school site?
We did it.
that? Okay, so everyone, you're clear? We're not moving any children from anywhere next year.
Can I ask Mr. Goldstein a question?
Do I have a choice? No, go ahead.
You have a choice to give a short answer. Love you, buddy. The counselors and the library media, are you looking to see if we have finances to support those? Are you looking to see the necessity of those? Because I think those are broader questions than just giving direction on getting those.
No, I'm not. I'm looking
Okay.
to explore each and every one of these. I'm not asking for direction to do a hire to
You
the
wanna look-
feasibility.
Because I'd like to know
each
from
of
the
these.
site administrators if the counselors are needed and wanted, and the library media people are needed and wanted.
So let me just say.
This is all for the, and I've been saying
Yeah.
this, the feasibility
Right.
of looking
Okay.
into.
So with library media teachers, it's sort of like me asking you if you like chocolate souffle and you've never had one. Most of these principals have never been in a robust K-8 library with this bona fide librarian media teacher with credentials.
No, I'm not arguing that,
So-
Ms. Korbutov.
so the
I was
point
just
is,
asking for clarification on the
I think
direction.
we have to have a broader discussion on, do we believe in literacy? Do we believe in the written word? Do we believe in cross-pollinating all of our curriculum from K through 8, and the biggest classroom is the library? All the statistics show it. Every single study shows it. You need a robust library. You go to these private schools. We've all toured them. They have not only librarians, but librarian techs in every single library, middle school and high school libraries. We don't have one librarian except in the high school. So how can we say we're going to be a lighthouse district? How can we worry about reconfiguration when we don't even have the basics? I mean, we have to start to talk truth. These are the fundamentals. So, you know what? I'd rather have a little less of athletics at the high school where we don't have fields and have LMTs at all the school sites.
And to give the short answer, I don't know, because it's up to the superintendent and staff to come back to say what they're actually going to do and who's going to do it.
Thank you.
We don't like what they're doing and who's going to do it. I'm not going to vote to hire them, plain and simple.
I just want a clarification on your direction.
To do these jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the last item is board comments, but God knows we've all spoken.
I had a question.
Okay, sure. Sorry, Mr. Spitz.
I have a concern, as I understand it, from our discussion tonight, we're going to have very soon a closed session to discuss just one part of the budget, and that is personnel issues. Is that did I understand that correctly?
No, that's what others said. I said I wanted to discuss some options for them to make some meaningful budget adjustments. There are things that we
Okay,
do here
so-
that we don't need to do
okay,
anymore,
so-
and they are personnel related, so we can't discuss them.
So that will be a very, very limited and targeted discussion because it's going to be in closed session. My concern is that I don't think that we can make very many decisions until we actually see what the second interim budget is going to look like. And I imagine we'll probably see something about that around the end of this month, or what would you say?
We could do it by February 28th. The thing about the second interim, I mean, I keep hearing that the information keeps changing, but it really, I haven't changed anything I've said. We're gonna need to make a reduction. If we make a small reduction, we're gonna need to maybe make a reduction next year.
So if we reduce 2 to 2.5 million this year, then we will reduce something next year,
Next year, if we did,
unless we have a parcel tax.
unless you have
Okay.
revenue, additional
Revenue, additional revenue, whatever that means.
Exactly. If you don't want to continue going in this direct, cutting every year, which was the purpose of the FFST, which is why, I guess maybe when I said, you can do it or you don't have to, you're gonna have to reduce. If you do if you go in the form of reconfiguration, and you've seen the numbers, if you took $4 million out of the budget in staffing, sustained staffing, then you would not have to, we wouldn't be back with you. Now, this is with our current known assumptions. We still have a CBA for our contractual bargaining units that has mandatory salary increases in place. That has to be in the budget, which is why you didn't have any deficits then, because when those are there, you have to put those in. And Mr. Spitz, as you said so eloquently, our salary costs outpace our new revenues every year, no matter, which is where the initial deficits come in, and when we're doing the June 30th. So either way, there has to be some form of budget reduction, whether it be a small one to get us through to 1920 with a balanced budget in 1920. In 1819. In 1920, we will be back here looking at reductions. That is what I've always said. Or if you don't want to, we want to stop this cycle of looking at it, then we would go with something more voluminous, like a reconfiguration of schools.
And I'm very worried about the timeline.
Thank you.
For making any personnel reductions with staff, because we would need to be able to know that information within the next couple of weeks so that we can start our processing. It's a very complex problem. It's a very complex
How's
issue.
next week? And closed.
We need to then identify who the staff members are, so and what credentials they have. So we would need to know by next week.
Okay. So I think the board has already some ideas. You've mentioned some in the recent months. I've thought of some. It's just not, unfortunately, we can't discuss it here. And I think it won't be as complex as you think. I think it's the more obvious things.
Okay.
Okay.
So don't we need to set up a meeting?
We have one
Very
for
quickly.
February 13th. We have a regularly scheduled board meeting. My offer to all of you is to get into close not at 3, but at 2. To have
I'm
some
for
more
that.
time. Okay.
You and I agree on that.
See, Mr. Spitz, we can find something to agree on after all.
That's 8:25 on.
Finally. So we'll meet at 2 p.m. and back here at 5 p.m. next week. Board comment. I have no comment. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, actually, I have a quick one. I know, yeah, you didn't know. No, so for those of you that watched SpaceX and the launch and the landing, which was really remarkable, just want to let you know that there's a young man by the name of Will. He's a mentor for our robotics team, 1515, for More Torque. When he isn't mentoring our students, he's actually the second stage rocket sensor. He's in charge of that entire department. Pretty cool that we have people from SpaceX working within our CTE programs, and there's a lot of that happening here. So we talk a lot about the middle schools and opportunities. I always say, when our students go through this system, K-12, by the time they get out in 12th grade, they've had dozens of opportunities and experiences in this school district. Never forget that.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Fun.
All right, Don, I'll see you tomorrow, but I'll be a little late, okay? Do you have anything exciting tomorrow? Did city sign the deal with ARB? That's a good news.
Yeah, right. Yes. Call me.
Yeah, at the last meeting you mentioned.
It's on the website. It's under like the future focus groups. There's a
send you an email, maybe you can send that booked and whatnot. But you said you had, yeah. Yeah, it's on the website, but yeah.